Welcome back to the Fantasy Wildcard Charity Streamathon. I'm your host today, Kev. You can follow me on Twitter at dynasty_goat. With me this afternoon, we've got my co-host Matt, who you can follow on Twitter at MattFFDynasty. We've got first stream down. We're on to the second stream now. Matt, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm not doing too bad. I've just had a quick bite to eat. I've had a nice cup of coffee to try and get the energy levels back up. But yeah, looking forward to this part of the streamathon.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's smashing, isn't it? We've had a great start to the day, and we're heading into the second quarter in NFL terms. We've also got our co-host Ali, who you can follow at FF Dynasty Grill. It'll be with us throughout the day. But yeah, we're on to the second part of the streamathon, and this is all about raising funds for fantastic charity in Mind. So to give you a bit more background on Mind, it's a charity that specialises in providing advice and support to empower anyone experiencing a mental health problem. They campaign to improve services, raise awareness, and promote understanding surrounding mental health. And every year, 1 in 4 of us will experience a mental health problem. Hundreds of thousands of people are still struggling, so it's really important we do get behind this fantastic cause. The Fantasy Wildcard team want to help support this charity. It's extremely relevant in the recent global pandemic and the increasing focus on supporting vulnerable people and improving their mental health. So we'd be absolutely delighted if you would like to provide a donation and support our charity streamathon. And to do this, you can either check out the link at the bottom of the screen or visit our Twitter page at Fantasy Wildcard. We've got our Linktree site on there, which can give you the details, justgiving.com/fundraising/Fantasy Wildcard. So thank you for your support so far. Like I said, we're now into stream 2 of 4. So over the next 4 hours, we'll be discussing the NFC and AFC East teams from a dynasty perspective. So with that in mind, we're jumping straight into the NFC East. We'll be discussing the Cowboys and the Giants, and we've got a fantastic trio to get us kicked off of this. I mean, what can you say about them? Dynasty Theory boys, the three of the most amazing people in the Dynasty community. We've had all of them on our show as well. So it'll be a nice nostalgic moment to have them back on today. So we've got John Bauer, who you can find at the Bauer Club. You've got Mitch Sorensen, who you can find at Dino MC. And we've got Dan Lamagna, who you can find at FF Coach Dan. So we'll bring them into the stream now. Afternoon, or is it morning over there, lads? Morning.
Morning.
It is morning.
Good morning.
Where have you been? We've been going for 4 hours already. Where have you been, guys?
I'm pumping caffeine in my veins right now just to wake up, but I'm ready to go.
I was worried. I woke up early this morning and it was like sunny outside. I'm like, oh no, I didn't set my alarm. But my 5-year-old hadn't jumped on my head yet, so I knew I was completely okay.
Yeah, it's still early over there in Utah for you, Mitch, huh?
Yeah, 7. It's not bad.
Wow, that is fantastic effort to come on that early. I know myself, I didn't sleep too much last night. I know Matt had about 5 hours as well. It was like Christmas Eve for us. So yeah, we're just looking forward to talking some Dynasty football. We're in the NFC East. I know we've got a huge Dallas Cowboys fan on our stream.
Can you guess which one it is?
You can see him flexing the guns right there. So yeah, we'll kick off. We'll talk about, as a pod fab would say, how about them Cowboys? So yeah, we'll start with the Cowboys, and I'll let you kick us off, Matt.
Kev, whenever you asked us what hour we wanted to be on,
yeah,
I said to Mitch and Dan, I was like, hey, you know what? I'm flexible, whatever you guys want. And Dan was not as flexible. He was like, I want to do the 9 a.m. spot, talk about the Cowboys. Mitch and I were shocked, to be honest with you.
That's why I know I have great podcast partners and brothers there, because they are team players here, especially Mitch, because Mitch is a Lions fan. He could die hard. He could have really gave me a hard time, but he's a team player. JB, I joke with on Dynasty Theory that he's a little bit of a bandwagon, and he will disclamer it's about his fantasy Dynasty players versus the team. So, but no, thank you guys. We appreciate it. And kudos to my team players over there.
Yeah, so I'll just say we'll kick straight off with the Cowboys then, and we'll start at the quarterback position with obviously Dak Prescott is coming back from what was quite a serious injury in 2020. But I'm just wanting to know your guys' feelings on, do we think that Dak can slot straight back in and be one of the top fantasy quarterbacks in 2021, or have you got any concerns regarding coming back from the injury, as I say?
He's behind me right now, so he's giving the green light. Look at him; he looks in the best shape of his life going into this season here. But JB, Mitch, no, I think we're all pretty confident. I mean, we've been talking about quarterbacks. We've been looking ahead to this season. I've shamelessly talked about the Cowboys and everything we're seeing online. Everything all the reports are positive. I have them slotted same spot as last year, not just being a Cowboys homer, but I think everything we've seen indicates he's full speed ahead.
This is extremely relevant because Dan and I were taking part in a 16-team Superflex League. Wow. So you miss on your first round pick, you're in trouble. You're set back a few years. At the 4th spot, I took Dak Prescott without any concern. He is my quarterback 3 today. The only concern I ever had about him, it wasn't the injury, it was the contract. And now he got that contract extension. He's staying in Dallas with all of those weapons. And he has the opportunity to stay in the NFC East, which we know is not the strongest division. And Dan, I think that's fair to say. And there are a lot of fantasy points to go around. So Dak Prescott, I am full steam ahead. Like I said, quarterback 3 for Dynasty. And if he's slipping anything later than that, it's a tremendous value in my mind.
Yeah, I think it goes Mahomes without a doubt. Josh Allen is pretty much the community's darling at number 2 right now. Then it's either Dak or Justin. And those are just kind of the top 4. I haven't seen in all my startups that really change it all. Lamar is going well after them. Kyler's always going after all of them. And I think it's probably fair because you look at Lamar, we have to worry about his arm. And no matter how much we all love Kyler, everyone's going to worry that at some point someone's going to hit him really hard, and then it's going to be like, well, can he keep doing it? So I think Dak at 3 or 4 is perfectly fair.
Yeah, I like to expand on Mitch's take there of 3 or 4. And again, even being a Cowboys homer, I have Dak at 4. I look at Justin Herbert and an equivalent talent level. I think you have 2 elite quarterbacks, but there's a significant age gap between Herbert and Dak. So I think you're going to get a lengthier return on investment in an equally talented ball club. Now, as John makes some faces over there, I want to state he's throwing out his challenge flag. That's not authentic. It's not the red one, JB. We got to send you a red one over there to Pittsburgh. But John, I think, is a closet Cowboys fan too, because he takes Dak in this startup we're in, and then he takes Zeke a few rounds later. So
I was going to take Cooper too. I was going to take Cooper.
I had to trade up to get Cooper just so JB didn't just hoard the whole Cowboys offense this season. So I'm a little fired up at you, JB, but go ahead. You're challenging me.
Well, I'm fired up too because Dan did one right there. He said one of my biggest pet peeves. He's bringing age into the equation for a player like Dak Prescott. He is 27 years old, Dan. 27. See, I've barely gone through half a cup of coffee, but Dan seems to energize me more with some of his comments than coffee ever would. We're talking about a franchise quarterback, 27 years old. I don't know about you, Dan, but I'm not playing Dynasty from a 15-year lens. I don't know if you can look that far ahead, but I'm not.
No, it's not that. We're talking the difference of 3 and 4 here, John. I'm not talking about putting his age in the equation and bumping him down to 10. But you know how you dynasty addicts are. I mean, God forbid a guy goes close to 30 and you can't trade him anymore. So there will be people out there that will be more attracted to Herbert and his age when they're both putting up incredible stats.
Not at the quarterback position, but this is for charity, so I'm going to bring it down a little bit. I don't want to be hostile. Okay.
I mean, Russ Wilson's trade stock's kind of declining right now. Why? Because he's in his early 30s. Whoa. So I think
that has more to do with an offense that doesn't pass the ball 600 plus times.
I think how many 4,000-yard seasons in recent years? They throw enough.
Yeah. That's it. Dak's got everything you need in a quarterback. Surely he's got the offense, he's got the rushing ability, he's got the age. I know you're talking about the age, but quarterbacks. I mean, Tom Brady, 40 odd. Drew Brees played. I know obviously the different style of play quarterbacks, but when we're talking quarterbacks, 27 is by no means old.
And I did not say old here. Kevin, Matt, you just got John and I all stirred up this morning.
John's got me fired up.
No, I think with Dak, just to wrap up on him, if you consider between him and Justin Herbert, just think about the ceiling lens. I can't see Justin Herbert being the QB1 in any season. I can see it with Dak because of weapons, the rushing upside, and the way that defense is as well. I think he's in a perfect division to smash it. So yeah, for me, it's a no contest between Dak and Herbert. But yeah, we'll move on to running back now. I'm just intrigued to get your guys' thoughts on this backfield. I know there was obviously Ezekiel Elliott last season, and Tony Pollard started nipping a few touches here and there. So just want to understand where you're taking these guys in dynasty. And you've got Zeke at an ADP of running back 14 in round 4, and Pollard at running back 40 in the end of round 11.
Yeah, I think this is something that, like, we kind of talked about on Theory this week, that the dynasty community has to come to, like, not the community, but yourself as an owner needs to come to a consensus of how you feel teams are going to handle this 17-game season. If you think they're going to, like, maybe they sit Zeke just for a game and that's how they figure the rest of him, or how Dan brought up, they're just going to mix in the number 2 back just a little bit more each game. And if that happens, I mean, I think we have to assume something is going to happen. And it's just going to be, if you think it's going to be giving that backup running back a little bit more, or if they're just going to rest their star player for a game in the middle of the season and give them a second bye week. I think that's something that everyone needs to come to. I think I'm leaning a little bit more on what Dan said, that they're going to give that second running back just a little bit more time. So we're not going to see 375 touch season this year. It's going to be like 325, 330, something like that for guys like Zeke and Henry and CMC.
I'm really interested where John's take is, because, again, he did just recently take him, so I'm sure he'll have a good analysis on kind of why he took him at that landing spot. And I like the pick. I'm a little curious. If there's the one position in the Cowboys lineup that I may have less conviction on than others, it's kind of the running back. And, in watching Zeke play last year, he looks solid. He's getting positive yards. I'm not like watching the Cowboys game and saying Zeke's terrible by any means. He knows how to take care of his body. He's staying healthy. He's giving you solid production and points. Like, I'm confident JB is going to get the points that he would need out of Zeke this year. But what I'm missing is, where is that explosion from a couple of years ago? Like, where is he just not getting that extra gear that once that is there? Is it going to come back? He seems to be in great shape. The O-line, if they stay healthy, and they need at least two of the three stud O-linemen that's been hurt the last couple of seasons to stay healthy, to keep that running game solid, that offense could be a juggernaut. So I think there's definitely, even more potential for Zeke. But then, to Mitch's point of that lengthier season, Tony Pollard flashes. He is given that juice that for some reason we're not seeing out of Zeke. He's the big play guy. So, I like Zeke here as like he's 11th in my rankings right now, give or take. But I'm a little bit hesitant.
And I think that, sorry, I had to go on mute. The birds were chirping out here. Birds were chirping. I don't know if it's picking up on the mic. But clearly I'm okay with him in that range. We look at Ezekiel Elliott, and I say we, the dynasty community, and everybody is sour on him. He's 26 years old, and I know you start to get into that area, just like Dan mentioned earlier. For running backs especially, that starts to raise question marks. He already got the second contract. He is not going anywhere, at least until after the 2023 season, because the way that contract is structured, while it is longer, the Cowboys do have an out, and it's like $6 million dead cap after that year. So when we look at running backs, I look at it in a 2, maybe 3-year window. Beyond that, the landscape is constantly changing. We look at Ezekiel Elliott, and my voice just went up there because I'm so excited. We look at Ezekiel Elliott. He had 320 opportunities last year between carries and targets. If you look at any other running back and you said you're going to get 320 targets plus carries, everybody would be ecstatic. But for some reason, when you mention Ezekiel Elliott, he's been dropping in startups. But you got to keep in mind, and I'm going to bring this up with Amari Cooper and the wide receivers in a minute, look at the quarterbacks that team threw out there last year. You have Ben DiNucci, the Pittsburgh kid, Garrett Gilbert, Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton was the best of the bunch. So you bring back a healthy Dak. The offensive line gets a little bit healthier, improves a little bit. Hopefully that defense stays horrendous. But give me a running back, 70-plus targets, 250 carries, mix Tony Pollard in there for, heck, even 30% of the running back workload. For 3 years now, people keep talking up Tony Pollard. He is not going to be fantasy relevant unless Ezekiel Elliott misses time. He's a change of pace back, and you could say he has the explosion. That's great. But for fantasy purposes, unless he's getting volume, you're not going to put him in your lineup. So strictly speaking for Pollard, he's the handcuff. possibly the number one handcuff throughout the NFL. But Ezekiel Elliott, I have no worries. The only worry I have is after, this 2022 season, 2021 and 2022, can you move him? Probably not. So maybe ride him off into the sunset. So that's my only concern, is like his resale value.
We got to keep him focused for you too, JB. But he got his annual offseason incident out of the way. His 2 pit bulls bit somebody. I was waiting for something this offseason. It was too quiet. So I think he's going to stay out of trouble and stay focused for you too, John.
I think a lot of people are taking for granted just how much that Dak injury affected him as well. I mean, it was the RB3 for the first 5 weeks. So what more do you want? That's where he was drafting him last year. I mean, are we saying that it was because of Tony Pollard that his efficiency went off? I'm putting it more down to that quarterback play personally.
Yeah, I think Tony Pollard is a cracking best ball pick this season, just in case he does get that odd spike game. I know a few years back, might have been his rookie season, he got like the full second half against the Dolphins, who were terrible at the time, and got like a 20-point fantasy game or something like that. So I think in a one-off standalone game, he's going to have a big shout for you.
I think in Dynasty, it is good to have Pollard. John mentioned being the best handcuff. An injury happens, you've got yourself a stud back, but you're also securing probably the running back of the future for the Cowboys, potentially. I mean, he could become RB1 if at some point they move on to Zeke. So it's good protection for your investment if you could grab them both.
But then at that point, he's 26 years old himself. He might as well be dead in Dynasty. So the cycle continues. One
good contract, and you get 3-4 years out of him.
Indeed. So we'll move on to the wide receiver core now, Matt, with a question about a stud wide receiver, I guess.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about last year's rookie wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, he had a great season, looked fantastic early on, but then obviously that Dak injury really affected what was on course for being a great rookie season from CeeDee Lamb. So I'm wanting to know just how high do you think Lamb can finish in 2021 if we do get a full season of Dak Prescott as his quarterback?
That's a good question there, guys, because that receiver room it's one of the most talented ones out there. It's one of the most interesting ones out there. Mitch and John, you guys know I'm a Amari Cooper homer. I still do believe he is their wide receiver one. But I'm interested to watch, the team get into camp, see how the veterans are performing, see how quick Amari Cooper's up to full speed. He had a little bit of a off-season ankle procedure there, a little cleaning out. I think 2 years ago he had a leg injury that was always bothering him. Last year he looked healthier, but I think he still needed that procedure after the season. He's very young still. He's in his mid-20s there, Amari. So I'm hoping he comes back and has one of the best seasons yet, but I really want to just actually see it on the field. As far as Lamb, you love that year 1 to year 2. I think he'll be able to expand what he could do in that offense, which is encouraging because he was awesome in year 1. And just having Dak back and the defense still, I think defense is going to be better, but not still lighting the world on fire. There's just a lot of volume in that offense. So I think you can expect a big 1-2 punch from both of those guys and see Lamb continue to climb. I could just never seem to get him in Dynasty. Someone's always going to take him before I get him, and that's my challenge.
I think that's a really good point, though, is it's like Lamb and Jefferson, and it used to be Higgins before Chase got drafted, but all those guys just always were drafted before I was willing to do it, because you have Amari Cooper, who's only 27. I don't think he's 27 yet. I think he's still going to turn 27. I mean, he is the number one in that offense. I love Lamb. I think he's going to be amazing, but it's always been hard for me to put those first-year wide receivers up in the same tier as people have them up above Adams and Tyreek Hill right now. And I just think it's crazy. I would much rather have the veteran guy that I know can do it than the rookie that I'm hoping will continue to do it.
Mitch and Dan, they kind of touched on it already, but the way I look at it, and I had a tweet yesterday, and it related to Amari Cooper in the 6th round of a Superflex startup, is greater than or better value than Justin Jefferson in the 2nd. I'm never one to get an early round wide receiver in Superflex startups because of the way the wide receiver points are distributed. You look at wide receiver 36 last year, it was 3 points per game less than wide receiver 12. That's really the only position where you're going to see a discrepancy so little. Tight end, there's a much bigger drop off between the top tier and lower. Quarterback, you're not seeing production from quarterback 36. And then running back certainly as well. The thing with these wide receivers, so CeeDee Lamb, I love CeeDee Lamb, and I think he is a top 12 dynasty receiver. But just like Dan said, there are very few situations where I'm going to land him in a startup. And we've talked about this previously, and as I typically do, Mitch always has these good takes and tidbits that he throws in our Discord chat, and then I steal them because he doesn't put them out publicly.
It happens a lot, to be honest.
And if I steal a good one, he lets me hear it. If I steal one that turns out bad, he goes, "Oh, John, that was a terrible take. Why'd you talk about that? That was kind of Keyshawn Vaughn. I take all the heat.
Really,
Mitch was on the ground floor." Anyway, we had to bring him up once. So you look at like Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, where these guys are going top 4, 5, 6, 7 in dynasty startups. Where was Juju going a few years ago? Where was DJ Moore going a few years ago? Chris Godwin. And now you look at all of them, they're 15, 16 and after in terms of dynasty rankings. So I had to steal Mitch's kind of typical response there, but I have to give a little bit of credit to my co-host. But, Amari Cooper, 26 years old. And it's a double-edged sword with him because, one, people want to make the argument, well, his contract, it goes through 2024. He could be cut after 2021. And because of the contract, the salaries in Dallas, they're like $25 million over the cap going into 2022 already. So they might have to restructure, but if he gets cut, that's one argument. And then people on the other hand say, well, there's too many mouths to feed. So which is it? Is he going to be in Dallas or not? You can't have both arguments. And I just think Amari Cooper, if I can get him wide receiver 17, 18, 19 in startups, that is an absolute steal in my mind. Again, give me that production that's very similar to a top 12 receiver 4 rounds later.
Yeah, and I really hope Dallas does, even if it's like maybe 2-3 year extension on Amari Cooper. I like CeeDee Lamb a lot more with Cooper there. And when we talk about those, first round receivers and Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and I love watching the film. We have fun talking about this, Mitch, JB and the guys, and JB's really strong with Mitch with the analytics. But when I watch Justin Jefferson, he does everything. Like his film last year, Cousins, he could be covered like glue and he's going to catch the ball. CeeDee Lamb's more of a product of being wide open in the slot, being, just the way Dallas uses him. He's just a natural athlete. He's got great instincts. He makes great catches. But I would much rather have Justin Jefferson on my fantasy football team than CeeDee Lamb. And CeeDee Lamb's going kind of close. Like once Jefferson's off the board, there's, Tyreek Hill in there and people are taking Lamb shortly thereafter. And it's just too early for me as much as I love him.
I was digging in. One last thing on CeeDee Lamb from me. Mitch tasked me last week on Dynasty Theory, talking about draft capital and slot percentage. And is it possible? Because typically we look at wide receivers, we say first, second, third round draft capital. That's what we want. But once you slip into the fourth, maybe if you have a higher slot percentage, that kind of makes up for it. And it was just an interesting thing I dug into, and I look back to 2015. But bringing that up because CeeDee Lamb, he was ran out of the slot 93% of the time last year. That is incredibly high for anybody, but let alone a first round receiver. And I just thought that was absolutely incredible. So Dan talks about he's a product of being open, but it's a product of that offense and being in the slot. And if he's going to run out of the slot, I don't care if he's open or covered. He's going to get you those fantasy points.
That's the beauty. Go ahead, big guy.
Big guy.
Big guy.
I've seen your guns. I'm not big guy. No, I'm just going to say on Lamb that he's such a fantastic talent. He was my clear rookie wide receiver one last year. He stacked up pretty well against the class this year. I just think in round 4, the way I start my drafts, going QB, running back heavy, I'm not getting him anywhere. I don't really touch wide receiver until round 5, 6 even as a wide receiver one. So, yeah, I do like the guy, but I'm not going to have a lot of him for that reason. I don't mind that he's a Cowboy.
And then I'm sorry, I keep saying really quick. Then 10 minutes later, I wrap it up.
It's John's favorite thing. If you guys ever listen to Theory, it's hold on, one more thing or real quick. And it is 7-8 times in a 45-minute show.
Anyway, real quick, we haven't talked about Michael Gallup. I love Michael Gallup too. And if Amari Cooper does go elsewhere, that presents a tremendous opportunity for him. So in Dynasty, if you can get him that wide receiver 40, 45 range. I love that. That's great value there. We had a question come up. I'm a contender. Do I move Gallup in a second for Adam Thielen? And I said I wouldn't move that package for Thielen. And if I had Thielen, I would break my phone acquiring Gallup in that second.
Yeah, Gallup's intriguing, and that's where I was going, just about Dallas and the matchups. We were just talking about Lamb in the slot, and we always love that matchup. But you got, teams trying to figure out how to cover Lamb in the slot. Maybe they have to shade a safety over, give some help to cover him. You got Cooper, who the teams are trying to defend, and that leaves Gallup always with these wonderful matchups in this high volume offense. I think in general, he's a wide receiver too. He's a very athletic kid. He's a good football player. I'll be interested to see, if Dallas can get a hometown discount and somehow keep him when his contract expires. If not, you're going to get a guy eventually that's going to be I don't see him as a wide receiver 1, but a solid wide receiver 2. So Gallup's intriguing.
Yeah, I know you're a Gallup fan, aren't you, Matt? He's going as the wide receiver 49 in startups, and you've got him in a few places.
Yeah, I just think at that value, that ADP 49, I think it's a great value. I mean, even if he stays with the Cowboys, yeah, they've got CD Lamb and Amari Cooper, but as we say, this is a high-powered offense. He's going to get some targets at the very worst. And then if one of these guys does happen to get an injury, obviously we're not going to hope for any kind of injuries. But if one of those guys was to go down, you're going to get a massive increase on value on what you've had to pay to get him. So for me, Gallup's definitely someone I'd look to acquire at a cheap value now. And he's got that possibility that he moves on later on after the 2021 season. It'll be interesting to see where he ended up. Obviously, for me, I feel like this is one of the best offenses that you could be on right now. So it will all depend down on to landing spot. But I just think at the value he's going at right now, he's definitely a target for me.
Yeah, best wide receiver core in the league, definitely for me. So we'll move on to the tight ends now, Matt, and I'll let you fire a cheeky question about a guy I think we're all pretty high on.
Yeah, I know we've spoke about it a little bit in as recent shows. Blake Jarwin, his current ADP is a tight end 22. So I'm just wanting to know, is he a guy that you're going to be targeting late on for the tight end position in your startups, given that ADP and as we've spoke about this high-powered offense?
I mean, I think he's fine as tight end 22, right? But there are only a certain amount of targets that could go around. And if we love everybody, it's really hard to love Jarwin. I said Jarwin, right? Yeah. I always forget. So Jarwin as well. But the guys that are going in that range, I like Higbee more. I like Gerald Everett more. I just think there's just guys who, I mean, they're all probably going to fail. I mean, truth out there, all these guys probably aren't going to matter at all. But I would rather go for those kind of guys than get Jarwin and know he's going to get 6 very solid targets a game. But I don't know if I'll ever see him get 10, 11 targets a game to where you could see fluky games from like Higbee and Everett and maybe even Fursker, just guys like that.
I'm right on board with Mitch. I'm perfectly fine with Jarwin. I have a ton of shares, and we are obligated, due to our contract with Fantasy Football Confidential and Linda G. If we say anything bad about Blake Jarwin, we're going to be getting a text here any minute. I don't, So, but yeah, Blake Jarwin at tight end 22, perfectly fine. After really, if you finish like tight end 12, what's that really getting you? Not much of an advantage. So you want to take Jarwin and tight end 22, great. Mitch mentioned Gerald Everett, who's going a little bit later. I believe they're both 26 years old. He just got the 1-year deal in Seattle. So I would like to see him in that offense. And then another name right around that ADP, Adam Troutman. And do I think any of these guys are going to crack top 6 to 8 tight ends? No, but they are intriguing options. And I think Troutman and Everett might have more of an opportunity overall in that offense. And it's funny because last year going in when Jarwin got injured, we were all saying that, hold on, I'm sorry, 1 second. My wife just came to the window and I'm like, I don't sign. What are you doing? But what was I said? We were saying Dalton Schultz was a blocking tight end, but he was productive. He got some run there. So I think, yeah, long story short, take him at tight end 22. Great.
Yeah, your ADP, your ranking there is like spot on of where you get Jarwin. I would add a Dawson Knox into that mix. Just watching once he finally got healthy last year, Josh Allen was targeting him a lot. So it's, you don't get an elite tight end in the beginning of the draft if you're not fortunate enough. And I think we all love getting those, the new hot toy in Kyle Pitts if you're not Waller, Kittle, Kelsey. But after that, you're just punting tight end to me, hoping to get any one of these guys, and you're going to be just fine as anybody else. I like the ceiling a little bit more of the guys that we mentioned because they're kind of the sole target in those offenses where Dalton Schultz did surface. The guys mentioned, Linda will be tweeting us if there's any Jarwin hate here. And, Linda made a good point about Jarwin. He's the yards after the catch tight end for Dallas. He is a little bit more explosive. He's also coming back from an injury, but all signs seem to be full speed ahead for him as well. He said, Dak, let's run it back again. He's ready to go. So, you draft him, you get him, you're fine, but temper your expectations. Dalton Schultz did come into the mix. They run 12 personnel, 2 tight end. Schultz is going to get open too. And again, just caps a little bit of Jarwin's hope that we would have for when you pick him.
Yeah, I was just going to say when someone turned up at John's house, I thought it was Linda about to give him a little beat down. So glad it wasn't Linda to give you a little beat in there. But that wraps up the Cowboys nice. So now I know it's sad news for Dan that we're having to not talk about the Cowboys for the full hour. But we will move on to the team that Matt supports, the Giants.
Yeah. Not quite as exciting as the Cowboys, I'll admit, but yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the Giants, and we'll start again at the quarterback position. So, given the weapons that the Giants have added, they've obviously added, and I've got to say, the superstar Giant wide receiver Kenny Golladay, and then Kadarius Toney in the draft, and obviously the return of Saquon Barkley as well next year from coming back from that injury. To me, it feels a little bit like a make or break season for Daniel Jones. So I just want to know, do you guys think, can he bounce back in 2021? Can he be what I've hoped he was going to be? Can he have a good 2021 season?
All right. I get to do it. Like, I'm the Danny Dimes guy on the Theory podcast. I don't know what there is to hate about him, to be honest. He's a pretty accurate guy. He doesn't have a great deep ball, but anything from short to intermediate, he's really good. And he can run. I know, like, he got sniped in that Eagles game, and it's the best GIF ever. Yeah, GIF, John, not GIF. GIF. But I think he has everything that you want. And when you actually look at the pieces around him, it's kind of close-ish to what the Cowboys have. They have a dominant running back. The tight end is very good. Kind of, makes up for the lack of having a good wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. And Kenny Golladay is, I think, a little overrated as a wide receiver. But I think actually what he's going to do there is very good for the team. And so for Danny Dimes himself, he is the guy. I think I was saying in the Discord the other day, I just keep finding myself drafting him because he's falling so far in drafts. I'm like, he's going to start this year. They have a good chance to be a good football team, or at least good enough to where he's going to be the starter. He's going to do like what the Bears did last year. They're going to have to pay a whole bunch of picks in order to replace him, like what the Bears had to do with Trubisky. And so I'm thinking, I'm still in on Danny Dimes.
I love when Mitch has these finds here. And JB, I know you're coming with a real solid point, so I'm sneaking in here on you, buddy. I have this like hot thought here, but I'm always learning from our team there, and JB brings a volume of numbers and gets me thinking about things I'm never thinking about. And then Mitch is like sneaky, man. Like every year, whether it's Dynasty or DFS, he gets to something early before the large masses does, and he gets me thinking. And Mitch and I are like, we'll be like polar opposite. And then all of a sudden we keep listening to each other and we come closer and closer.
It's very true.
I think he's on to something. So this offseason, I've been listening to Mitch talk about Danny Dimes and the Giants a little bit and how he's getting them. And I'm coming around. There are like 3 offenses that are really intriguing me this offseason that are moving up in my rankings. And it's the Bengals, and I think everyone's kind of hot on the Bengals. So to me, I'm losing a little luster because I think everyone's going to take them at a spot that's, I'm not going to get the value. But the Dolphins and the Giants are the two other offenses that are really starting to intrigue me for a lot of reasons. And today we're talking about the Giants. I was excited to come on the show to talk about the Cowboys, and Kadarius Toney, as the guy knows. We're not at Toney yet. We're at Danny Dimes. but the weapons that he has on this offense is really starting to stockpile. And Matt, I just hope for you that the clapper could find a way to piece that all together and utilize this and give us guys here in fantasy football some clarity, because I just need a little bit more clarity on how he's gonna rotate Tony and Shepard and Slayton and those guys. Even John Ross is a deep stash. You got Ingram, you got Rudolph, you got an elite back in Barkley. The offensive line, the second half of the season, really played a lot better, and they protected Danny Dimes. And when they did that, that offense started to come around. So if he could take the next step, cut those turnovers down, he's got all the weapons. It's all going to be on the clapper. What do you got, JB?
Sorry, I keep telling my wife, my son had to bust out here. He had to come out, had to get some outdoor time. I'm like, you're on the camera, just so you know. So I don't. But yeah, it is a make or break year for Daniel Jones. His contract goes through 2022. Then you have the 5th year option if they want to pick it up. But if he can't take that next step here, maybe they start to look ahead towards the future. But he has no excuse at this point. They brought in additional weapons, and if he fails, it's kind of on him. So I would say it is make or break. And when you go back and look, so when we were still super flexology back in our early days here, we had a podcast, an episode about the incoming rookies. And that was the time that Daniel Jones was one of the incoming rookies. And we talked about his strengths, and it was the intermediate and short throws and his, some rushing upside. And that's what we've seen. And they've built that offense around him to fit to his strengths. Barkley, Ingram, you had Shepard, Golden Tate, Darius Slayton, the only deep threat. And I use that in air quotes. But now with Kenny Golladay coming in, like Mitch said, he's going to do great things for that offense. I think he's going to help stretch the field. But I don't know. We've seen growth from other quarterbacks, whether it's fantasy or real life. And I don't know that we've necessarily seen that from Daniel Jones up to this point. The only positive last year, I think he cut his fumbles from 155 to 10, so that was growth in that department. But then you could look at it and say, well, there's no real weapons outside of Ingram and Barkley, and Barkley went down with an injury. So we'll see if Daniel Jones has the opportunity to work with a full, healthy offense with additional weapons. Dan, as you can tell, I did not mention Kadarius Toney because, well, you and I have different definitions of weapons. So that's going to be an interesting conversation here.
I know.
You go, big man.
You're the host, man. I'm just hyped today. You guys got me pumped up here. But, I think partially, too, I'm a little bit torn on how much of a make or break year it is for him, as long as he doesn't completely flop. Like if he has a decent year, just shows some growth, but maybe doesn't completely achieve, I think it could be Coach Garrett that's going to be the first one to go before Danny Dimes. There's just too many offensive weapons there to not succeed. You extend to that 5th year. The only thing I'm apprehensive is they have 2 first-round picks next year, the Giants. So if they want to position themselves to get a quarterback, they certainly can. So we'll see what their belief is in him.
And I'm not saying we need to see a 5,000-yard passing season, 158 quarterback rating out of Daniel Jones, but we do need to see growth. And if there isn't growth, they might need to reevaluate that. If we see a little bit of a step up there, they're competitive in the NFC East, they have a winning record. Yeah, I think he at least buys himself through 2022, and we see that rookie contract play out. But what happens beyond that? So for dynasty purposes, I don't know, Mitch, where do you have him for dynasty purposes? Or what kind of pivot are you looking to make?
It's hard because if someone has Danny Dimes, they kind of already like him, right? That's just part of how it goes. And if I have him, I'm not really willing to trade him. I have him ranked under Carson Wentz, right? But if someone offered me Carson Wentz straight up for Dimes, I don't know if I'd actually make the trade to get Carson Wentz.
Oh my God, I would.
I'm sure you would. You don't like Danny Dimes. We've gone over this.
I like Daniel Jones, but if we're looking just at the next 2 years, who has a better likelihood and chance of going beyond that? I think it's Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz can stay healthy for 3 games. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about Wentz. And just to wrap up on Daniel Jones, I think I could easily see a scenario where this time next year we're calling him Drew Lock. So
I can see it too.
There's potential there, but we'll stop talking about Trash Man Dan, and we'll move on to stud running backs.
That's funny because that's the nickname we have for Dan Lamagna. I don't know.
Wow. All right.
That is hilarious. So yeah, Saquon Barkley, obviously, he's a guy that's a stud. He's had a bit of an injury history now, and he's currently going as the running back 2 in dynasty startups at the back of round 1. Just want to get you guys' thoughts on how risky he is in dynasty if you're happy to spend a round 1 dynasty pick on Saquon.
I'll be quick on this. He's my running back 2 still, and I know there are concerns the last 2 years. The injuries have racked up a little bit, but when it comes down to talent, that's what we're looking for at the running back position, talent and volume, and that's what we see with Saquon Barkley. He excels in the passing game. Again, that offense has just been a disaster. So I'm interested to see. Again, this is a big year for him because then after this season, do they pick up his 5th-year option? And what happens if we see another season-ending injury? I think his stock begins to plummet, but that's a bet I'm willing to make. I know a lot of people in startups, we've seen Jonathan Taylor propel into the number 2 spot. Give me Saquon Barkley, just so much more upside. And I as long as he stays healthy, we're going to see that bump in value here beyond 2021. So yeah, Saquon Barkley, running back 2.
Same for me. He's locked in running back 2. And there was actually a time to where I was going to consider moving him up to the running back 1 if the Panthers went in a different route for their quarterback. If they went with Justin Fields or Trey Lance to where we don't know how they're going to use the running back in the passing game, that would have made me maybe switch to Barkley because we know he's going to get, if he's healthy, 100 targets without a doubt in that offense. And so I don't really see how you could take anyone else above him because they just don't have that receiving upside that Barkley has. And we know we love those receptions in PPR.
Yeah, solid RB2 for me. So you got it across the Dynasty Theory board. You know, my concerns with Barkley has nothing to do with fantasy. I wish he'd pass block a little bit better, help Danny Dimes out in those blitzes. But he's so uber talented, it don't matter. They're not taking him off the field. So, you know, again, big year for him just to stay healthy, take the next jump in his career, keep working towards his next big contract. And then hopefully all those improvements in the Giants open things up for him as well. You know, if you got those receivers out there like they're expanding, it's a little less pressure of putting 8 in the box. It could be a nice year for Saquon Barkley.
Indeed. Are you got any thoughts on the resident Giants? Giants fan,
I don't want to come across too much of a homer, but yeah, I fully agree. He's got to be the RB2 for me. Based purely on talent, I'd argue he's the most talented running back in the NFL. I might catch some heat from the CMC lovers, but yeah, for me, he's the most talented, as we've all just said. The opportunity he's got, the volume he's got with that passing upside. Yeah, he's quite easily the RB2 for me, and that's tough. How much I love Jonathan Taylor as well. It's tough for me to say, but yeah, easy RB2.
Imagine grabbing him in round 2 of your startups. That's like a dream, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a dream. So, speaking of dreams, we'll go on to wide receiver and a guy that you dream often about, Matt.
Yeah, so we're moving on to the wide receiver. I know John's just took a little swipe at him earlier on, but Kenny Golladay. I'm interested to know what your feelings are on him now. Obviously, moving from the Lions to the Giants. How do you see it affecting his dynasty rankings? Are you moving him up or are you moving him down? I'll be interested to see what Mitch thinks as the resident Lions fan.
I think he's the exact same that he was for the Lions. He is a 65 to 70 catch guy. He's going to crack 1,000 yards, and you hope he gets the touchdowns to bring him up a little bit. But my problem with him is there was always talk with the Lions, who's actually better, him or Marvin Jones, right? And Marvin Jones is going 10 rounds after Golladay is. And while I really like Golladay, I'd also be okay with someone like Robbie Anderson, who's going much later than him. So I think for a team fit, very good for the Giants, but I haven't drafted him. And I think I've done probably 10 startups so far this season. I haven't drafted him once. And I was a really big Kenny Golladay guy because, of course, he played for the Lions. But now it's just like...
Now he's gone. You've left him.
Exactly. There's like 15 other guys I could just get a little bit later and get the same production.
when I'm looking at Kenny Golladay, and I'm with Mitch. I love Kenny Golladay. I have the Kenny Golladay Lions jersey, and Dan will say, JB, you don't have any Steelers jerseys. So, but he's going to be 28 years old, and he's been another one that we really haven't seen hit that next level for one reason or another. The Lions organization, injuries, for Kenny Golladay himself, injuries at the quarterback position. So there have been a lot of different things to come into play. The one that deserves a pat on the back is Kenny Galladay's agent to get that 4-year, $72 million deal with the wide receiver market that we saw. A lot of wide receivers taking 1-year deals. So whoever that is, hats off to him or her, whoever it is. But for dynasty purposes, Kenny Golladay, I do think I would have him at the same spot if he were a Lion or a Giant. The only thing is he was playing with a quarterback who was more willing to take accurate deep shots down the field in Matthew Stafford than maybe Daniel Jones. You look at the intended air yards per target last year, about a 1.5 yard difference. So that's pretty substantial when you look at the quarterback position. But I think Kenny Golladay is going to do a lot of good things for this offense. And from a dynasty perspective, if I'm talking about him wide receiver 25 to 30, I think that's fair. There's more guys that I would be interested in than Kenny Golladay at this point.
Yeah, I think we all agree we're locked in that like 25 to 30 range. You have a Lions fan here that's watched them every week of every season, who's really giving an honest take. And then in like a dynasty, I have a roster where I really could use a wide receiver one, and maybe I have some draft capital to trade, and I've gotten an offer of Golladay for my number one next year, and I'm thinking to myself, man, that's it shouldn't be such a painful decision. And I ultimately declined because I think I'd either rather chase a number one receiver that I think's closer to being elite, or wait until use that number one on a receiver next year that I think's going to be better than Golladay. So that's where he's kind of in that tweener range. I think we said earlier in the show, he is good for the Giants. Like, he's definitely a good football player. He's going to help them out. He's the best number one receiver they've probably had since maybe OBJ maybe. So plus for the Giants, I wouldn't mind having him on my team, but more often than not, someone's taking him before me.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I had one share of superstar Kenny G, and he's actually on my worst dynasty team. It's no correlation at all to Golladay. It's just unfortunate.
It's just the owner. It's the owner.
It's just the owner. He's had a nightmare in that league. But yeah, I actually moved him for the 110 rookie pick this year, which the team's not contending anytime soon. So I thought that was a fair deal to grab one of those top 5 QBs, or never know, might even have a stud running back drop into like a Javonte or even a Kyle Pitts. So I thought that was a fair deal to move on from Kenny G. But yeah, I'm similar to you guys. I've probably got him late 20s, and with his ADP being early 20s.
Okay, that's a good point where you say where you got like that, you traded him for that 110, and I like that strategy, to get that quarterback if you need to get that running back. Let's say at 110, all those quarterbacks and running backs for some reason all went heavy. I'd even be happy taking a Devonte Smith or maybe Jalen Waddle than Kenny Golladay. And so I think no matter what direction you landed at 110, you were going to win.
I'm just a winner, yeah. No, it's just one of those, like, I have got 10 top players in my rookie draft. I've got your 5 QBs, the 3 running backs, Chase and Pitts. So that was sort of my benchmark. Anything after that, it does get a little bit dicey with Smith and Waddle, but yeah, just I'm lower on Golladay, and it's partly because Matt likes him as well.
Yeah. Really quick, this has nothing to do with the Giants or the Cowboys, but something, Kev, you just mentioned in rookie drafts. If you haven't taken part in your rookie drafts yet, that 110, just like Kev said, that is my threshold. So I have found it's very difficult to trade back within that tier, within those top 10. Not to say they're all in one tier, but then I found it's possibly even more difficult if you have 111, 112, 201 to get up into that top 10. So if you're able to get in that top 10, get one of those 5 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, and then Pitts and Chase, do whatever you can to get there. But Kev, I completely agree.
Legends, smart legends, both of us. So yeah, we'll move on to another rookie actually for the Giants. I can see Dan clapping. He's been looking forward to this one. Kadarius Toney. I just want to get your guys' thoughts on how comfortable you are with taking him in round 2 of drafts and what you think his ceiling is in Dynasty if it does hit.
I am so comfortable. I'm going to kick my feet up here and let you know that I have taken him in every second round I could grab him. And, Matt, be happy, man. He's your future number 1 wide receiver in New York. And I may be in the minority here, and JB's gearing up, and Mitch is shaking his head. But this kid is uber talented. Yes, a little raw. JB could say late bloomer, age, whatever analytics he wants to pull out. But this guy's a converted quarterback, right? So there was obviously going to be a learning curve. But when that light bulb went off, he did not drop anything. I don't care what they were saying his hand size is. I'm reading on Twitter now. He is an uber talented wide receiver with yards after the catch are incredible. Now, again, year 1, hey, you get him in the second round, a rookie, takes a little pressure off, let the kid develop in the NFL a little bit. It's his next learning curve that I think's coming ahead. But who's he competing with? He'll be in a rotation probably with Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton, and they'll move those guys around. They'll use him like a Swiss Army knife. I could see him in the backfield and doing some other things, just trying to get the ball in his hands. But he is electric, and I think this kid has a bright future. So I think in the second round, that's wonderful value. Give me Kadarius Toney all day. And now for the defense. Here we go.
John goes crazy.
This isn't the defense. This is the prosecution, baby.
Right. I'm just going to go real quick and say I worry about his targets in fantasy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Shepard is the slot guy. I mean, he gets all the slot work if he's there. I don't see Toney getting the slot work over him. And so it turns into he's going to be on the outside. He'll probably have some really good plays schemed up for him. But I just don't know if that ceiling is there. And I'm not going to say he's a best ball guy. But when you look at his profile, he's kind of a best ball guy.
That's the question, Mitch. Will they move Shepard back outside? Will they move him around and rotate? How creative will Jason Garrett get? But I would want that matchup with Toney in the slot because I think he's a bear to cover. I think he's a matchup nightmare. Sterling Shepard's a good route runner. He's a good football player. So I think he remains in the mix. He's like that steady, not respected guy, but he's a good football wide receiver. I'd be more worried like Darius Slayton. To me, his stock has just plummeted. I think he's going to wean his way out and become a depth piece. And I think Toney will have a large role in that offense. Because remember, the Giants aren't draft him in the second round of rookie draft. They've invested some capital in him, so they've got to make this guy produce. Go ahead, JB.
Dan, what Dan is doing is called filibustering, and he is keeping the floor so nobody else can take it. You notice he just keeps saying things. But really quick, this is the last really quick. Over at Dynasty Theory, we hold ourselves accountable, and as I was saying it about 5 minutes ago, I kind of paused and I still said it, but I wanted to look it up. Daniel Jones was actually, and I want to put some respect on his name, the 3rd most accurate deep ball passer last year. And I said, I took that jab, but I just wanted to correct myself because I don't want any of your listeners coming back. What the hell's this guy saying? The issue was it just wasn't many of them. It was under 10% of his total passing attempts. Anyway, I'm glad I got that off my chest. So Kadarius Toney, I'm a big analytics guy. We've talked about that countless times. When you look at him, there are 2 receivers. Kadarius Toney, I have 1 share of, and it's because it's in our Dynasty Theory Listener League. He slipped, and I believe I can move him for profit to somebody right over there. So that's my plan. The other receiver is Jalen Waddle. When you look at both of these guys, and I know a lot of people, and you just saw it, the Jaguars on their big board, Jalen Waddle and Trevor Lawrence had the same grade for them, almost the perfect prospect. But maybe they need a new analytics department in Jacksonville. I'm available. So when you look at breakout age, college dominator, market share values, everything, Kadarius Toney, and my son's crying in the background because I brought up Kadarius Toney. That is how upset this whole Bauer family is. But Kadarius Toney, he is one of those guys you probably need to watch a little bit more of the film because he did have the position change like Dan mentioned. So I do want to be fair. But I would say you asked the question, what is how do we feel about him in the second round of rookie drafts? The only reason he's even sniffing the second round for me is because of the lack of draft capital across the board at the wide receiver position. If there were like Tylan Wallace, Seth Williams, a lot of those guys, if they would have pushed into day 2, Kadarius Toney, don't do that, Dan. Don't do that. He would have been pushed out of my second round. But honestly, because of the first round draft capital alone, and we know that's going to give him opportunity, he is in my late second round, but he's still like wide receiver 10, 11, 12 for me. And the hit rates, you talk about hit rates, and you look at historical production. If you want to go back to my year is always 2003 because of the fantastic database that Dave Wright put together. If you want to go back to 2008, 2010, 2015, the hit rates just are not there in the first 3 years for first round wide receivers with breakout age concerns, college dominator, non-early declare, and you can say it's because of the position change. Well, I hope those shares enjoy rotting on your bench, Dan.
Speaking of filibustering.
Oh, that's harsh.
Anyway.
Are we done on Tony?
Yeah. I'm looking at the clock here. Sorry, guys.
No, it's well, we finish on Tony. He's an interesting guy. He's a polarizing prospect. Obviously, we've had differing views on him on this stream and in the community as well. So just want to thank all three of you for coming on the stream today, representing Dynasty Theory. Tell the audience where they can find you before we say our final goodbyes.
Find me on Twitter and Instagram. Well, just Twitter at the Bauer Club, Instagram and Twitter for Dynasty Theory at Dynasty Theory FF, and then Fantasy Football Confidential at FF_confidential. We didn't get to him, but Evan Ingram, he's a buy in Dynasty. Go out and get him.
I'm just at Dino MC.
FF Coach Dan on Twitter, and with these handsome studs over there at Dynasty Theory. And guys, thanks for having us, man. This mental health awareness is huge place in my heart, man. I've advocated a lot in our local area here in Pennsylvania. Charlie Wysocki, a friend of mine, look him up. He was the all-time leading rusher at the University of Maryland and on the Cowboys roster before coming down with bipolar disorder. So just a great cause. We love you guys. Thanks for having us.
And if you're watching, don't be a cheap ass, get your wallet out and make a donation. The Dynasty Theory team threw our donation before the show kicked off, so do the same. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, guys, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, thanks, guys.
Take care.
Right. Well, he's gone. He's back. You're going in a sec as well.
I am going in a second. I know you were trying to just boot me straight out and even let me say my goodbyes.
Trying to get rid of you. We'll bring in our next co-host, Ali, who's just necking his tea. So apologies for that, Ali. But yeah, we'll catch you in an hour.
I'm just going to have another quick power hour to recharge the batteries again. And a nice short stint for me, that one. But yeah, enjoy the next section. You've got another great guest coming on. So I'll definitely be watching it while I'm having a little rest.
Indeed, we have, and thank you, Matt. We'll see you soon.
Catch you in a bit, man.
See you later.
Yeah, he booted himself, and so we're now moving on to another two teams in the NFC East. We've got Washington, and we've got the Eagles, who I support as well. And we have got a fantastic guest. He's an absolute genius, to be honest. He's one of the best number-based guys in the community. He's got a fantastic book and series out as well. So we'll bring him in. We've got Jordan McNamara, you can find on Twitter at McNamara Dynasty. Good morning, Jordan.
Hey guys, good to be here. Congratulations on the event, and let's raise some money.
Indeed. It's a very, very exciting show. Obviously, I'm an Eagles fan, and we've got Washington as well that have gone through a bit of change this offseason that's made maybe some of their weapons a bit more attractive than they were previously. And we'll start off with Washington with Ali firing the first question. Over to you, Jordan.
Good morning, Jordan. Just got a question here about the quarterback situation in Washington. So do you believe that Fitzpatrick's going to be the quarterback this season? And do you think it gives a boost for the receivers to have that gunslinger quarterback like Fitzpatrick rather than the Alex Smith sort of type they had last season?
Yeah, I'm a big Ryan Fitzpatrick fan. I've been a big Ryan Fitzpatrick fan for a decade plus now. And I think of late we have seen his ability to elevate offenses, to elevate players. And I think that this is a good example of a case where he's going to come in. And what's interesting to me from a dynasty perspective, we look at this, and I'm thinking in terms of bets, right? I'm thinking about what's the, basically what options does he give us? And I struggle to see, as I sit here right now, I think that they're going to be pretty good. I think their defense is going to be pretty good. I think he's a good player. And I struggle to see how in 12 months, 8, 10, 12 months, they're going to have a high enough pick in the NFL draft to replace Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? I think that is a very real, he can play himself into a multi-year job. He signed there for 1 year, but I think you can very realistically see a scenario where they don't have a better option. And frankly, he's a good option in my opinion. So I'm a big Ryan Fitzpatrick fan. We have seen some of the interesting stuff with him too, as he's played a little bit quicker and not held on the ball quite as much. He's been better, right? So some of that gunslinger stuff, holding on to it, chucking it, all that stuff. If you get a little bit quicker, you can be more efficient. And he's one that we've seen that with. And so I'm a big fan, and I think that what they have going in Washington is pretty good with him. Like I think Super Bowl is in their range of outcomes, much in the way that San Francisco was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy, Fitzpatrick. If you're playing in any sleeper dynasty startups, his ADP is hilarious. It's way off the board. So if you haven't got your own rankings, the casual players do tend to miss him. But I mean, just thinking of Fitzpatrick, he's going as QB 30 in startups. I mean, for me, he's a QB 2 in dynasty. He's someone that's going to be potentially volatile because he does have these games where he's throwing it around and getting a few interceptions. But with that comes the touchdown upside as well. Think about like a Jameis Winston a couple of years back for the Bucs in terms of the 30 touchdown, 30 interceptions. I don't think Fitzpatrick will throw 30 interceptions, but he does give that exciting upside where you might not want to watch the games with Fitzpatrick, but he'll definitely deliver those numbers, and he's got some decent weapons as well in this offense. And he's actually still pretty sneaky as a runner. It gives you nearly 20 yards a game and a couple of touchdowns a season, so he's not giving you zeros. But when it comes to like a guy like him and Jameis Winston, just comparing the two, they're going fairly similar ranges in dynasty startups. I'd rather have Fitzpatrick, to be honest, because with Winston, he's got competition that Peyton might throw in Taysom Hill. He probably shouldn't, but he might do. Whereas Fitzpatrick, I don't really see the competition in Taylor Heineke. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think he's pretty secure in my eyes?
Yeah, at Analytics of Dynasty, we have a real draft position tracker, so it tracks all basically where players are going in real drafts. So it's constantly updating, constantly tracking more drafts. So since the NFL draft, Ryan Fitzpatrick's ADP in our formats have been 13.10. There's been 16 startup drafts that we've tracked so far in this month. And that's basically quarterback 34.5. Wow. And if you sort of look at some of the guys going ahead of him, Kellen Mond at 33. Again, that's crazy to me. I'm a wow. Kirk Cousins fan. Like I'm a Cousins guy. So that's one to me that doesn't make a ton of sense. Like then you look at Ben is going ahead of him. At 30, he's at 31. Jordan Love's going ahead of him. It is a 4-round gap between him and Jameis. And I will say that I think the difference between Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick, I still think that franchise quarterback is in Jameis Winston's range of outcomes. I don't think that with Ryan Fitzpatrick just because of age, right? And we've sort of seen how the NFL reacts to him. He can be a cult hero, but so is Gardner Minshew. So and we've sort of seen that reaction. So I'm a huge Ryan Fitzpatrick fan in the context of what we think he is. We did a trade recently. My co-host at Football Guys and I, Chad Parsons, we co-own a team, and we needed some quarterback help. and it was a part of a bigger deal. But we added Ryan Fitzpatrick as part of a bigger deal, and we said, hey, basically this shores up quarterback 3, makes us a lot more comfortable. But our quarterback 2 is Jared Goff, right? So for the long term, we like Goff better than Fitzpatrick, but in the near term, there's a very realistic chance that Ryan Fitzpatrick is our weekly play over Goff, right? I can absolutely think that that's possible. And so that's one of those interesting things. Like when you sort of look at him, he can sort of fit, right? He sort of plugs in the hole of, fixing immediate, security needs, but also I think providing some interesting upside. So, a top 12, 14 finish this year wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah, with Fitzpatrick, he's played for him and James have both played for the Bucks, haven't they, Ali? And I know that's your team. You've seen them both. Have you got a preference if it was down to them two at cost?
I think it's still just Winston. I think he was in a terrible situation for the first 4 years. And then he had year one with Bruce Arians. And historically, it's never been a really good year for quarterbacks, the year one. Tom Brady's a bit of an outlier there, but he never had a good situation. The defense was terrible. So I still think Winston, with his age, I think he's still got a shot to be a franchise quarterback. But looking just for 2021, it wouldn't surprise me if Fitzpatrick finished ahead of Winston. I think the Saints are definitely going to throw in Taysom Hill. They did it with Breeze, so they're going to do it with Winston. So for this season, all over Fitzpatrick, definitely.
Yeah, definitely an interesting guy. Another interesting guy is Antonio Gibson. Actually, he's someone that I feel is lower than he should be. Really, he's currently at running back 16 in dynasty startups. So, just want to get your thoughts, Jordan, on where he sits in your rankings and what do you think is a bigger factor to his future success? Is it the touchdown regression that's incoming? Is it the new QB? Is it the arrival of Curtis Samuel? How do you see things panning out for Antonio Gibson in dynasty?
I think he's in an interesting spot. And I was talking about this to some subscribers recently. The receiver thing is weird. And so we don't really have a good example of this to sort of look at in terms of guy going from college receiver to a running back. Like there's not a ton of great examples of that. So I still sort of hold that reservation. But I think he's a really good player. And so I think when you sort of stack him up, he's going in a range. I've got him at running back 13, 402 in startup drafts. And that's just about the same as Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'd rather have Edwards-Helaire over him just because I think Edwards-Helaire is a pretty it's a platinum profile at this point. He's being underpriced. But then you have to figure out Gibson in the context of like J.K. Dobbins and Aaron Jones. And then he's going sort of ahead of Zeke. And then Najee Harris is going ahead of him. Cam Akers is going way ahead of him too, which is interesting. So I think there's you could put that range, outside of I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire deserves to be well above where he is. You could put that range sort of in a tumbler, roll the dice out and whatever order they come out in. I don't really have a hard time accepting, right? I'm probably, I think there's plenty of reasonable outcomes in that range. What's interesting to me is you get a guy like Antonio Gibson who's going around and a half ahead of Josh Jacobs. That's one that seems, and that's not an Antonio Gibson fault. That seems like a really, that's the biggest inefficiency going right now. But yeah, so I mean, to me, I think Gibson, I like him quite a bit. And I think this offense is going to get better. It was pretty limited in terms of what they could offer last year. Logan Thomas running the most routes and at the tight end position in all of football and being pretty bad at it is hopefully those days are gone. So,
yeah, our co-host Matt will like that dig at Logan Thomas. He is not a fan at all. Any thoughts on Gibson, Ali?
Yeah, I think I'm probably a little bit too high in Gibson. I've got him ranked, I think, RB12. So I'm probably happy to have him as my RB1. He's on the fringe, but he's in the same tier as Akers. I can't see why Akers has been taken way ahead of Gibson. And then they're comfortably ahead of J.K. Dobbins. But the Zeke one is interesting. I think they're back-to-back, Gibson and Zeke for me. So, yeah, I think Gibson's in for a really good year. It wouldn't surprise me if he was a top 10 running back. But then there's so many good running backs that he could finish as the RB 16 to 18. Definitely the offense is going to take a step forward. But, yeah, I'm all over Antonio Gibson this season and in Dynasty.
Yeah, I just think with those sophomore running backs, guys like Akers, Dobbins, Gibson, I think they're all very similar in terms of what the value should be. But me personally, I just end up taking the cheapest. I do think Akers has got the most upside with that offense, I guess, and the potential free down work. But I think that's a sneaky shot of being a timeshare, in LA with Darrell Henderson. Maybe that's because I'm a big Darrell Henderson fan. It was my running back one coming out, but I'm probably just being a little bit biased there. So we'll move on to the wide receiver position for Washington now.
Yeah, so Terry McLaurin is going to be the wide receiver one consensus on the team. So just a quick question, buy or sell Terry McLaurin? Does he finish as a top 18 wide receiver for you in 2021, sorry. So just in context, the first two seasons he's finished wide receiver 29 and 20 so far in his career.
Man, it seems like higher than that, right?
Yeah,
that's interesting. Seems like higher than that. It's always interests me that people go higher in ADP than they finished in their career. Those are always interesting cases. He's going. We got him at 13.5. I think that wide receiver 2 type range is plenty possible. It takes a lot to be a wide receiver 1, and just in terms of volume. And I think, I like his floor probably a little bit more than I like his ceiling. So I don't know. I think your line is pretty good. I think it's pretty good. If I had to take a bet, I would say he finishes better than that. That would sort of be my take. But I think it's close.
I think generally the community are a lot higher. I think he's one of the Twitter darlings. I think the community is definitely higher on McLaurin than what I am. I think he probably finishes just below 18. So 18 to 20, I think, is where he's going to finish again, especially with Curtis Samuel arriving. But yeah, definitely in that range. And I think his ADP of wide receiver 14 is a little bit too high for me.
He's an interesting guy, is McLaurin. You touched upon it a little bit then when you were speaking, Jordan, about guys that get drafted ahead of where they finished. And the first guy that was going off in my head was DJ Moore. And I know earlier on this offseason there was I saw some rankings where McLaurin was like top 8 in some spots. Now I don't know how reliable those rankings were, but it seems really strange to me that a guy that's been a top 20 wide receiver, it was wide receiver 20 last season, just seems wild that he's going there. He's 25. He came out as an older prospect. He's been a top 20 wide receiver just. I'm a big Curtis Samuel fan. I'm sure we'll come on to it in a little bit, but I seem to be lower on McLaurin than most. I think I've got him maybe mid-20s in my rankings, which means I don't get him anywhere. But I do think he's such a talented player, but there always seems to be somebody in a draft room that has him top 15, top 20. So, yeah, really interesting guy for me to weigh up as such.
Yeah, when you sort of look at that prototype, Amari Cooper is the big one for me in terms of that guy that has basically 2 good seasons to start, but then goes massively more expensive than he has finished, right? And that's always one of those ones I sort of look at and sort of peek at and just tilt my head a little bit. But then you look at the flip side, right? You've got guys that all they've ever done mostly all they've done is finish better than their ADP. And then you look at guys like Michael Thomas right now, and this is probably more of an age thing than anything, but Michael Thomas, Allen Robinson, Keenan Allen, right? They're going 11, 14, and 16, right? And then you sort of get the reverse effect of now everyone's let down by Amari Cooper, and all of a sudden he's like a smashing value in like the 6 rounds of super flex drafts, right? Like those are interesting things when they happen. And McLaurin kind of feels like one of those ones that we're going to do that with. And, in 24 months, he's going to kind of be who he is right now. And we're going to be like, oh, this is a smashing value because everyone's, looking for the next great thing.
Yeah, he got 134 targets last season on 15 games. So that's like 9 a game, I think, as quick maths almost.
Yep.
I can't see him getting 9 a game this season. Just with obviously adding Curtis Samuel, Adam Humphries, I believe they added as well at slot. So
take the targets to Logan Thomas and throw him to Terry McLaurin.
Yes,
Yeah.
that would probably be best for this offense indeed. And you mentioned about guys that perform and they're going after where they are in ADP. I got thinking about your book, Sally, about Mike Evans. He's a guy that goes in the late teens. And me personally, I'd over a 2-year period, which is what I play Dynasty on, I'd rather take a shot on Mike Evans.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's very much underrated in the community. Constantly, 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and his touchdowns are always there. He's always a massive red zone target. So it's going to be consistent again for Mike Evans. I'd much rather him to McLaurin in the same sort of range.
He's probably going to go to the Hall of Fame, right? Like that's kind of where we're heading with Mike Evans, and it's amazing that we're going to spend the last, I think he's got 3, 4, 5 years of good still in him. He's not that old, right? I mean, he isn't. We're not talking about Julio Jones's age. And maybe he offers, I don't know, if he offers 80-90% of what Julio did through this range of his career, like that is a smashing success. And it's interesting to me that you sort of go and you look, and of all the people in that draft class, right? That I know we're getting a little far afield, but I have to. This is a pro Mike Evans. I'm a pro Mike Evans platform. When you look at all from that class, so you look at all of the greats in that class: Beckham, Devonte Adams, Allen Robinson. Sammy Watkins was in that class and started really well as well. The 3 guys that lead that class in receiving yards. And this is incredible when you think about some of the other guys, and especially what Adams and Beckham have done in their career. Yeah. It's Mike Evans by 1,200 yards. But that's Mike Evans by a season over anyone in the class. And it gets even better. The person that's second is Jarvis Landry, who is at 7,028 yards. Right. So Mike Evans has 8,266 yards in his NFL career. That is over 1,200 more than Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry has played more games. And then the next one after that, it's not Adams, it's not Beckham, it's not Allen Robinson, it's Brandon Cooks with 6,800. So when you look at their careers, Mike Evans has played 6 more games than Devonte Adams, and he has basically 1,600 yards more than Devonte Adams. Wow. So just think about, to contextualize how good Mike Evans is, just think he's basically he is essentially a season, maybe a season and a half better than what Adams has done to date. It's a remarkable career. And, and when you look at the touchdowns in that class, he is second to Adams. That's where Adams' greatness is in terms of his ability to score touchdowns. But 61 touchdowns, that's 10 more than Beckham. So you think about that huge run that Beckham went on. It's 21 more than Brandon Cooks, who has been Mr. Just think about this. He's been basically Mr. Top 20. He's basically missed the top 20 twice in his career. His first season, then the last season with the Rams where he got injured. Other than that, he's been in the top 20 every year. And Mike Evans has 21 more touchdowns than him in 3 more games. Just think about how good that is, right? Over the course of his career, he's basically the only person to go through the start of his career this far with a top 24 season every year. I mean, just Mike Evans is an unbelievable fantasy player, and people don't give him credit for it. And listen, if he's going to be undervalued the rest of his career, I'm riding it. I will ride Mike Evans till the wheels fall off. So sorry, Mike Evans comes up, and I have to give
I love it.
Go on, Ali. I'll let you. You're a Bucks fan, aren't you? So I'll let you have a moment.
Yeah, I think the trouble with Evans and his on the defensive side, Levante David's played at an incredible high level throughout his career. But we've just been a crap team that no one talks about. So Evans doesn't get the recognition. We've not been in the most televised game. So it's nice to see that finally we're getting some credit and people are talking about them sort of players.
Yeah, just all I'd say is apologies to the Washington fans that wanted to hear about the Washington team. But I guess the take you can get from it is if you can flip Terry McLaurin for Mike Evans plus as well.
We're smashing.
Smash that for sure. And we'll talk about McLaurin's teammate now, the newly signed Curtis Samuel. Just want to get your thoughts on this, Jordan, about if you think Samuel can be a top 25 wide receiver again like he was last year. And what percentage would you put on it to say that Curtis Samuel could outscore Terry McLaurin in 2021?
That's interesting. I think McLaurin's pretty comfortably the favorite would sort of be my thought. Samuel's a really interesting case because 2 years ago, he was essentially one of the league leaders in air yards per target, right? He was just a big downfield target, but was massively inefficient, basically way underperformed that. And there's a couple of things you could say about that, right? You could say, hey, listen, they schemed him, right? They sort of thought of him in this way that they're going to funnel so much of their offense through him. But he way underperformed that. Now, is that quarterback? Is that him? Is that, that he couldn't live up to it? So it was a really interesting case study for me because typically that's something you sort of chase, which is those big air yards guys. But he was an interesting. So he has a big reduction in it this year, but is massively more efficient. So it's an interesting, and now he goes back to his offensive coordinator who posted the huge air yard numbers, right? So it's a really interesting sort of dance about it. And if that's going to be his role, I mean, Mr. Shot Taker himself, Ryan Fitzpatrick, as being the guy to throw it to him. I mean, it's a really interesting thing. So I'll be, of the news that maybe I'll be tracking at the wide receiver position, I think how they're going to use him is a really, really interesting one. Because is he going to be that big, deep, sort of the deep vertical stretcher that they had with him when the OC was in Carolina with him, or is it going to be more of a, he's running more horizontally? Yeah, I think that's going to be a really, really interesting debate and sort of where he's most efficient, and if that was, if he gets unlocked by a guy like Fitzpatrick, or if they have sort of found a new role for him. I think that's a huge watch and something I'll really be paying attention to in the preseason.
Ali, what's your thoughts? Say.
Yeah, so for me, I get excited when Curtis Samuel's used around, out of the running back position. He's used in multiple ways. I think I get really excited by his outcomes rather than just that deep guy. So I hope they do use him in a number of ways because I think he was top 25 last year. So I think he can absolutely do that again here now in Washington.
Yeah, I really like Samuel. I was on a show last month, the Fantasy Nightcap with Shane Barrett, and my bold take, which it probably won't happen, but my bold take was that in 2021, Curtis Samuel would outscore Terry McLaurin. So I think it's ambiguous. We don't know how he's going to be used. I mean, last year, the Panthers, they were a bit of a mess in terms of how they use people, I thought. I thought that the most efficient way to run that offense would be to have Robbie Anderson as the deep guy, DJ Moore in the slot, Samuel doing a bit of everything. And it ended up that DJ Moore was like a deep threat and Robbie Anderson was used in the slot. Mm-hmm. So that was just really strange how Samuel was part of this offense. And it does come back to Washington where he was used as a deep guy. I don't know what the best way is for him to smash it in fantasy, but big Curtis Samuel fan. I'd probably put it at 60-40 that McLaurin outscores him, but maybe that's a little bit more bullish than most.
No, I think that's fair. And the one thing that I've studied a lot with the analytics of Dynasty, and it has made me it's really, really changed my philosophy and my belief in things, which is I don't think we have a good, we don't have necessarily the best, ability to predict situation. And so to say, it's much closer to 50-50 than you like, I don't think that's unreasonable at all. Right. I mean, I would think that based on their career arcs to date, I think McLaurin's the favorite. But I wouldn't say, if we get on this next year and, we're rehashing the 2021 season and McLaurin was the second wide receiver behind Curtis Samuel, I wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me. It would be, I think, a mild upset, but it wouldn't shock me at all.
Indeed. So that wraps up the wide receiver call, and now move on to the tight end in that team, Logan Thomas. And you've got an interesting question on this one, Ali.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we have got to talk about Logan Thomas. After his top 3 finish in 2020, do you think he's a massive sell, or actually, do you think his value's that low now, where he's actually a hold or a possible buy? His ADP is the tight end 9, just for perspective.
Yeah. So for me, it's a pretty massive, sell. And here's the reason why. I don't think that tight ends in that range are particularly all that different. And so when you see a profile that's being valued, where you can, what's the difference between him and Evan Ingram, for example? Like Evan Ingram, I think has more long-term upside than a guy like than Logan Thomas has, for example. So that would be one that I would sort of point toward and say, hey, listen, I think that there's some, arbitrage opportunities, or you can sort of move to a different, player. One of my favorite stats for Logan Thomas is 40 tight ends had 20 or more targets and produced better yards per route run in 2020.
Wow.
0 ran more routes.
Wow.
So he's basically and listen, I'm not going to knock him for this. It's out of necessity. He was a huge part of their offense, but he was from an actual production standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, he was no better than he's ever really been in his career. And so one of the things that, I partner with Pro Football Focus, and I sort of look at a lot of their stats, his yards per route run was not that different than anything he's really done in his career. When you sort of look at all of his ancillary stuff, it's not really been anything different. You look at his quarterback rating and stuff on his targets, and it's basically right in line with what he did. It was never really he's a lot better. He had a lot more opportunity, and that can be fantasy viable. I tend to bet against those, to bet against those volume situations when there's not good talent. I think that's an easy, or when there's not, a high end talent. Those out of necessity situations typically aren't things that I think are all that repeatable. So, and we've seen it, right? They're going to use Curtis Samuel more, right? They're going to funnel probably more, I would assume, towards put more on Antonio Gibson's plate, those sorts of things. Like they've done stuff to sort of address the skill positions to make it so that they're not so reliant on Logan Thomas. So that would sort of be my thought on him. I think he's I think we have him right around where you said, in terms of his value. It would be just a clear sell opportunity for me.
Yeah, 110 targets last season. I can't see that again, just with the additions they've had. I think where he's going in your stats as well, tight end 9, as I've said before, like after those top 4, I'm not really bothered until you get into like the 20s. He's in that range where there's lots of younger guys. There's lots of guys with more upside. There's just better options, really. I would say is with Thomas, you've probably picked him up as a free agent last season or the last off season. So I don't think you're going to be going out and acquiring him. And I find it hard to actually sell him for anything a decent value. So you're kind of stuck with him. And I know his ADP is tight end 9. In the drafts I'm in, he doesn't go tight end 9. He goes about tight end 15. So yeah,
we've got him at 12.5 is where we have him. And he's going in a range with guys like, and it's an interesting range because you could sort of view these guys a little bit differently. Him versus Gesicki, right? You kind of know that Gesicki's been more of a guy in terms of some production stuff than Logan Thomas has been in his career, and he's younger. Irv Smith's going ahead of him, which is interesting in terms of the type of bet you want to make. Evan Ingram's right there next to him. Robert Tonyan's later. A guy that I really like is going a couple rounds later, Tyler Higbee. That's one that, at that cost, Logan Thomas is a clear pass, and Tyler Higbee is a clear smash to me. And Goddard's sort of in that, is a little bit ahead of that, but it's sort of in that range. So when you look at that, you said sort of top 4. I think there's a top 4, and then there's probably a tier of 2 guys after that really interest me, in Andrews and Hawkinson. And then after that, the difference between, Fant's sort of smelling that a little bit too. But after that, I think the difference between, basically, tight end 8, 9, and then tight end 15, you could sort of make a lot of arguments in that range for guys that are, if you shook them up and they came out a different way, you can't really fault all, too much in that range, because I think there's a lot of different stuff going on. So yeah, he's an interesting guy, but for me, I think at his cost, there's profiles I like better, and there's profiles I like better at cheaper costs too. And Higbee would be one of those.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Higbee, the second guest today to mention him. So I'll just have to make a note of Tyler Higbee, I think. And imagine if you can flip Thomas for Higbee plus, that's a pretty decent deal. And that wraps up on Washington. We'll now move on to my Eagles. And you're going to kick us off with a question about a guy that I'm not his biggest fan.
Yeah, question for you, Jordan. Are you a Jalen Hurts believer? Do you think his current ADP of the QB14 is about right, or are you avoiding him at this cost?
To me, he's a pretty clear avoid. And so one of the things that's really interesting, and I've been studying a lot in drafts, and I, each year with the analytics of Dynasty, I focus on some different topics. And one of the things this year that I'm really looking at is quarterback production, as I'm sort of writing the 2022 edition right now. And what I would say is, I think we bet on knowing who the next guy is too aggressively. And so when you look at guys, and he doesn't necessarily qualify with this, but I think the same argument sort of applies. But I've just been looking at top 12 quarterbacks historically in ADP. And the guys that have done it multiple times, right, the multiple hits in that range, just so massively outproduce the guys that either haven't hit yet or have hit once, right? So Justin Herbert, to me, is in red lights a little bit with where he's going, and there's guys going after him that I just think he can't. It's a super high risk thing to go with Justin Herbert. And so Jalen Hurts sort of qualifies in that too. And you look at guys sort of at his cost, right? I mean, Matthew Stafford's going after him. Matthew Stafford has top 5 odds to win the MVP this year. It just seems like Dynasty community hasn't really, top 5, top 6 last I checked. The Dynasty community hasn't really caught on to that, I guess, or has not valued that in, or thinks that Hurts has more upside. I don't know, but for me, that's just a clear right. That Stafford's just such the clear bet there. Another interesting one, sort of in that same ilk, is Deshaun Watson, and sort of how do you value those two guys? And for me, it seems very much like, what's the longest view in the room, and the longest view in the room is Deshaun Watson's on a Hall of Fame track, and it kind of isn't comfortable right now for a lot of reasons. But ultimately, I think, if he plays again, right, there's almost no debate to me about who's the higher likelihood guy, right? It's pretty clearly Deshaun Watson. And so then you sort of put, Rodgers is going right. They're going basically about the same cost. I mean, you have questions with Rodgers too, I guess. And then you sort of can look at it and say, he's going ahead of Tua. he's going ahead of guys that have higher pedigree. Yeah, there's some interesting guys in that sort of range in the teens where you could say, all right, maybe he fits in. Is his upside higher than a guy maybe like Baker Mayfield? And so that's, but I guess that would put him, further down, maybe another couple of rounds later in sort of my level of comfort with him. So I'm probably just not going to get him. And it's one of those funny things when you do rankings. I was doing rankings last year, and like Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a good example of this. Everyone had Clyde Edwards-Helaire at in the top 5 of the running back position, and I had him at 12. And it didn't really matter, right? The difference between 8 and 15, right? I wasn't going to get him at 8, and I definitely wasn't getting him at 15. So it was a clear thing for me. That's kind of the thing with Hurts. I'm just not going to have him above guys like Watson, Stafford, and at that point, it doesn't really matter, right, where I put him, because I'm not going to get him, just because he's going to go earlier than that. So for me, at his cost, he's a clear avoid. You just take, I take a guy over the next 3 to 5 years who's going to have a better career, and it's, to me, the pretty clear answer to that. The most likely answer to that is Matthew Stafford. So I would avoid Hurts, and I'd be pretty aggressively on Stafford. And the other thing I would say too about the Eagles is, they've done some jacked up things maybe in terms of some of their processes, and some of the decisions that they've made. But it's pretty clear to me that the way they're stockpiling picks is all right, if, let's give this a shot. We'll sort of see how it plays out. You look at the starter games that that second round quarterbacks in the NFL get that don't hit for fantasy success, and it's 20, which would pretty much line up with exactly how many starts that Jalen Hurts would get through this year. That's kind of the same thing with Drew Lock, right? So to me, I think that they're sort of taking the long game, and they probably, if they're being honest, are in on Deshaun Watson at some point, right? That's a team that you just look at the assets that they've put together. That's probably a team that's in on Deshaun Watson, right? That's probably some of the decisions that they made have said, in the next 12 months, if we're going to address the quarterback position, we've got multiple outs, right? We've got franchise guys that are out there in terms of, maybe it's Rodgers, maybe it's Watson, maybe it's the first round quarterback, an upcoming draft. All of those things, that's a lot of danger to me for Jalen Hurts. He basically has to do it this year. And, given sort of their whole scenario, I'm not sure I want to make that bet.
Yeah, Deshaun Watson to the Eagles. Make it happen, Howie. Just going back in time a little bit with Hurts. I know when the news that Wentz was being traded to the Colts came about, and Hurts's dynasty ADP was still in round 3. And this is before the draft when the Eagles had pick 6. So it was in prime spot to take a guy like Justin Fields. Or at that time, we thought potentially maybe Trey Lance might be going around that 6 to 10 range. Before the 49ers interest, but I thought it was wild to be taking him in round 3 then, and I still think it's pretty wild to be taking him in round 3 now. It's a premium dynasty startup pick. So much danger involved. He's got this season, but you've got to look at that franchise. I'm an Eagles fan, and it's not a good team. Devonte Smith, he could be something massive for the Eagles, but again, he's got some questions regarding his late breakout and the offense as a whole. I think, in my opinion, for Hurts to hit, they'd have to change the offense to kind of match what Baltimore have done with Lamar Jackson and really build and go all in on a run-heavy offense where he's used like Lamar Jackson. I think they're quite similar, but they're not going to do that. I don't think they're bright enough of a franchise at the moment to do that. It's clear that they've stockpiled picks for next year to grab a QB or to move up to take QB, or even this Deshaun Watson take you've given us there. That's got me very excited to lose a lot of games this season. Ideally, as an Eagles fan, I'm hoping we go 2-12 and beat the Cowboys twice. So yeah, just bringing it back to Hurts. I'm avoiding him. To be honest, he's probably one of the few players that I won't take at any price.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because when you look at him, people are like, "Oh, he was better than Wentz," like a little bit. But one of the big stats that I look at is expected completion percentage. So completion percentage by itself isn't a great indicator, but you look at what you did basically versus what you were expected to do. And that's a stat that I really look at. That's the next gen stat from NFL.com. The second, so the worst was Haskins at minus 7.1. The next worst was Wentz at minus 4.1, and then you go down and it's Locke, it's Garoppolo, and then it's Hurts. And so he was bottom 5 in terms of that stat. He's below Sam Darnold, for example. There's some other guys in there that you're like, eesh, like that's not great. Again, small sample, all that stuff. It just gives me some pause. And maybe a new system helps him, all that stuff. But it gives me a little bit of pause in terms of how he performed with the opportunity that was afforded to him. That gives me a little bit of caution.
Indeed, and we'll move on to a guy that's maybe got a bit of caution as well in him, Miles Sanders. Just want to know if you think the Eagles' offense will bounce back in 2021, and with Sanders currently going at RB18 in startups, is he someone you'd be in on? And how much does being part of a good offense and a winning team factor into the running back position?
Yeah, the running back position's one that I think to have super elite upside at running back, like it helps to have really good offense. But after that, I don't think necessarily how the team finishes and offensive ranking. That's something it's been pretty random in terms of how they've produced. And I think that there's some really good reasons for that. If teams are going to run the ball a ton, right, that's a largely an inefficient way to construct an offense. So you're probably not going to finish that high. And so it actually has a perverse benefit to the running backs to sort of be in a situation like that. For him, he's an interesting one because of the cost. I understand that there's folks that really like the talent, but for me, I look at a lot of like prior examples. So one of the things that I look at is what I call base rates, which is basically just know your position in your round in the NFL draft, and we can sort of tell you what those guys have done historically, and in terms of their odds to hit and all that stuff. And then the other thing I look at is what I call density, and so that's once a guy's actually hit, you can sort of look at it and say, all right, like here's how dense their hit is, right? Here's how many times they hit. Here's what they kind of look like. And so for me, Miles Sanders is going, and it's actually dropped, which I think is probably right. He's going 412. I have him 412 since the draft, 18.5 as his draft position after the draft. And so, when you sort of look at that, it implies basically, 67% hit rate, which is pretty good. You look at, his prior examples, his prior guys have actually hit 71.5% of the time. So that's actually, he's maybe a little bit undervalued by his prior examples. The question for me is really the upside. And this is the thing, his prior examples of guys that through 2 years haven't hit for a top 12 seasonal finish, only about between 3 and 4% of them have hit for a top 12 seasonal finish. So for me, that's a very capped upside type scenario. When you sort of when you go down another couple players, you get David Montgomery, who has a top 6 finish on his resume. His prior guys have produced 2 top 12 seasonal finishes 70% of the time. Right. So again, the sample's not huge on that, but you sort of just look at the career arc, it's much different. Whereas, it seems more like a capped upside situation for Miles Sanders than I think people appreciate. So if he's sort of in that RB2 range, like I think he could do worse. But I think you sort of look at that and you're like, I don't understand why he's going ahead of. He hasn't outproduced David Montgomery. I don't know why he's going ahead of him. And that's kind of the thing with me that I look at, and for me, it's at his cost, I think he's going too high.
Indeed. So, have you got any thoughts on this backfield, Elliott, Sanders, or any other guys? Anyone that catches your eye?
Don't do it, Kev. I was all over Kenny Gainwell before the draft, so I'm just sad that he didn't get the draft capital that I wanted. But no, I think Sanders is a safe play as your RB2. Not sensational, but I probably would rather some of the players that were going around his ADP over Sanders.
Indeed, yeah, he's an interesting guy. Is Gainwell? Is there anything you want to add on Gainwell or ask ask Jordan about him.
Yeah, so my pre-draft crush, Kenny Gainwell, he finally went in round 5. Is he going to be somebody that you're interested in taking in your rookie drafts, or is his draft capital so low that you're out on him? His startup ADP is the RB 50, and he's the RB 6 in rookie drafts.
Yeah, I mean, for me, he hasn't put away Kerryon Johnson yet. Kerryon Johnson's had a pretty rough start to his career. I was a big Kerryon Johnson fan coming out. That hurt a lot. That was painful and costly and expensive. That was an unfortunate miss. But I do think this is a great scenario for him in terms of you have a starter there that is good, but I don't think necessarily elite. He's not backing up Saquon Barkley. I don't think that maybe he comes in and takes his job, but I think to put him away as being the running back 2, I think that's a big ask. So for me, Kerryon's is probably one of the bigger, I look a lot at one injury away running backs as being a big part of my strategy. And he's one that for me, I think at his cost and at his profile, I think is pretty interesting. And again, the injury concerns are there. I understand all that. But I'm not necessarily, it's not a long-term bet. I'm sort of at this point, he's more of, a short-term window. You're looking for basically fill-in weeks. And if that turns into, if one fill-in week turns into 6 weeks, something like that, that's a pretty good upside situation. So I think Gainwell has work to do to put away, to be the running back 2 would sort of be my thought.
And yeah, Kerryon's actually the same age as Najee Harris, I think, isn't it? I think 23 years old. So he's still got 2 or 3 more years left of production. So it's definitely an interesting take that you got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the good part about coming into the NFL really young, right? You can have a second act that's not at 28 years old, right? He's got a second act at 23, and you can sort of, like you said, there's a lot of guys in this class that are in this running back landscape that are, that have multiple years on their career that are younger than Najee Harris. And so when you think about that for a second, it's an interesting strategic decision. And I think that that's the benefit of coming out early. Right, you tend to go earlier in the draft, and you get more opportunities if it doesn't go great. So, I'm really interested on Kerryon. I have him in a lot of leagues from when he was really expensive, and now he's not, so that was a loss. But I'm hanging on because I think what success looks like is clearly different now than it was, a couple of years ago. But I still think at his cost, right, he can have success that maybe looks 2, 3, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, right? Those things are pretty successful outcomes that given his cost right now.
Yeah, Kenny Gainwell, I was big on him before the draft. Obviously, the draft capital it catapulted him down my draft board. I mean, with his ADP going 211 in rookie drafts, I'm not going to have any of him, to be honest. I think I'd rather wait a little bit and take a punt on a guy that's got a few in front of him, but in a great spot like Elijah Mitchell. I'd rather wait a round and a half and do that than sit on Super Kenny G, which is a shame because I know me and Ali were massive on Gainwell before the draft. It's just a shame what's happened. And we'll now move on to the wide receiver core. It's not the best wide receiver core in the NFL by no means. Just want to know your thoughts on Devonte Smith and Jalen Reagor on there. On Reagor's dynasty stock, really. He's currently going at wide receiver 50. What effect do you think Devonte Smith has on Reagor's stock, and how do you see them both in dynasty?
Yeah, so Reagor's a really interesting case because it's rare. So in the analytics of dynasty, I've tracked what I call survivor rates. So survivor or survivorship, and that's basically how long you go before your team addresses the position again. So it is very rare for a team to draft a first-round wide receiver and then to draft a receiver over him the next year. I think the stat that I had was from a couple years ago, so I'd have to update it. It hasn't much changed. There's been 3 guys this century that's happened to. So that's a really interesting. I think it was Michael Jenkins, I believe AJ Jenkins. I believe the two people that did the superseding were Roddy White and Michael Crabtree. So those are the two guys that were actually drafted over guys that went, in the first round the year prior. So we have that situation here, which is, again, it's very rare for that to happen. And so, I like the Reagor profile a lot. The young breakout, that's a big thing in college. You get that with the NFL, with good NFL draft pedigree, and about 60% of those guys have hit. That's pretty good, right? And then when you sort of compare that to Devonte Smith, his later breakout, you sort of group those guys together, it's about 30%. And so that's just a simple way to sort of look at it. Again, you have to adjust for the fact that Reagor missed in his first year, so that goes down. It's obviously not the 60% anymore. But that's an interesting debate for me, right? I don't think there's necessarily a clear answer. If Reagor is going to go a lot cheaper, then that's something that I would sort of probably pivot towards, take the cheaper guy in a situation that I don't really know. I think that's probably good decision making. I haven't really been in on. I don't. So one of my things is I don't really draft receivers in rookie drafts typically. I think they're largely overvalued. And if you've just over the past 12 years have not drafted a wide receiver in the first round of a rookie draft, just completely ignored the position, you've done significantly better than if you've drafted wide receivers, right? Just because their hit rate's so much lower. They drag the first round of the NFL draft, the first round of rookie draft ADP much worse. And so I've, at cost, I've been pretty off of these guys. I will take selective shots. Like I think last year, Brandon Ayuk was one of those guys that he was going so cheap, and I really like the profile. I could say, okay, like that's a really, in the second round of a rookie draft, like I can really get on board with that. But for these guys this year, like I don't, like Waddle, Smith, I have Trey Sermon over every wide receiver not named Jamar Chase, just because I think that, when we sort of studied that historically, that's the right play. And when you sort of look at the odds of their outcomes, right, the guy that's going to most likely tilt a season, it's much more likely that it's Trey Sermon historically than it is a guy like Devonta Smith. So all of those things, I mean, I'm pretty off of him. And I think, if given the shot, if I can take a shot on Jalen Reagor rounds and rounds and rounds later, I think that's probably the right play.
Yeah, Reagor in round 12, it seems a pretty interesting shot on a guy that's what was potentially a first rounder in rookie drafts last season if he snuck in at that back end. So
he was my wide receiver 1 last year. So,
wow, I'll have to go buy him then if it's getting the seal of approval from yourself, Jordan, as a smart dude. And we'll
disappointing year 1, but he was my wide receiver 1 last year. But I've for reasons that have nothing to do with Jalen Reagor, I've changed my philosophy on drafting wide receivers. So it's an interesting thing. So yeah.
Good stuff. And we'll get you to wrap up with a tight end question, Ali.
Yeah, so with no current movement in the Zach Ertz situation, how are you approaching the Eagles tight ends in Dynasty? So Gollett's going as the tight end 8 and Ertz is the tight end 18.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I think Ertz is as good as gone June 1. So that would sort of be, hey, look, we got a couple of weeks. We're within a couple of weeks. That June 1 deadline seemed like forever away, not that long ago. So we're getting there. It's turning the summer. It's nice. I think he's good as gone. I think that writing's been on the wall for a while. They can cut him and basically spread out his cap hit over a couple of years, which I think they're going to probably end up doing, either that or trade him. I think he offers something in terms of, there's teams out there, Buffalo's been vocal, for example, about needing to improve the tight end position. They were on Gronkowski. I was hoping that they would land at someone like Evan Ingram in a rehab type scenario. To rehabilitate his value. But I think that they would be a potential suitor for a guy like Ertz. There's other teams out there that would be potential suitors for Ertz. I think he's more of a name probably at this point than he's a true physical talent. But he gets open. He can sort of do those things. I don't think he's going to be, he's not George Kittle or he's not, Travis Kelce at this point. But I think in terms of, getting 80, 90 targets in a season at that cost, I think that's plenty doable. And one of the things I typically say about tight ends, and this is held up historically, is as if you've been productive and you have a job, you're typically going to be productive. And so we've seen that with guys, we've seen that with Gronkowski last year, right? We have seen that with Jason Witten a couple of years ago, right? When he was in Dallas, then he moved to the Raiders and didn't really have a job, but we've seen that. Jared Cook is a really good example of that. So Ertz to me is one of those scenarios where I can say, all right, if he lands someplace, I think he can be productive. Again, it might not necessarily be huge upside, but 80, 90 targets is plenty enough to sort of put him on the wide receiver 1-2 type spectrum. With Goddard, he's probably the most established receiver on that team. And, I think that's an interesting, most established pass catcher on that team. So I think that's an interesting scenario for him. And I think, when you sort of look at some of the other questions that they have a running quarterback. So that's typically, they don't do a ton of targeting the running back. That is a trend that we've seen. So that could be a benefit to when you're allocating all the targets, you could just actually see that Goddard gets a bump from that. It wouldn't shock me if Goddard led them in targets this year. And I think that's an interesting, it's interesting sort of at that cost, but he fits in that same range with guys like Logan Thomas and Ingram and, Gesicki. It's sort of in that range of guys. The question is from just a picking player's perspective, do you want to sort of take the first shot in that range or do you want to wait? And that's sort of the question I think that you would have in terms of putting the team together. I think he's a good player. I'm not necessarily sure I love the price given all the uncertainty there, but I think that he, it wouldn't shock me if he posted, 3-4 top 8 finishes going forward. It wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah, I think what you'll end up seeing is Ertz goes and then both their ADPs rise. So I think they're both very interesting buys right now. So yeah, that brings us to the end of the Eagles, and it brings us to the end of our time with you on today's Streamathon, Jordan. So if you'd like to tell the audience where they can find you and what you've got going on at the moment.
Yeah, you can go to analyticsatdynasty.com. The Analytics at Dynasty 2021 edition has been out for a bit now. You can get that. And if you go and use Wildcard as the coupon code, I'll put that up once we get off. I will. It'll be 10% off, and I'll match an additional 10% to the stream. So I'll donate that as well. So yeah, you can go find all that analyticsdynasty.com. Any of the books. The 2020 and the 2021 editions, probably the best way to consume Analytics at Dynasty, those together. So yeah, go ahead over there and I'll put the promo code in here when we get hung up.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on today. And I'll just shout out the podcast you're on over at the Football Guys as well. That's a Dynasty show you do with Chad Parsons. It's one I listen to every week. It's fantastic knowledge. It's, as you'd expect, it's analytically based. But yeah, just keep doing the great work you do, and thanks for jumping on the stream today, Jordan. All the best.
Yeah,
thanks guys. Best of luck. You're doing a really good job with this.
Thank you, Jordan. Bye.
See ya.
Right, so we're halfway through stream 2. We'll bring back in the man himself as he's taking a drink. Matt, he's back. I'll take him off mute so he can speak. In fact, I can't take him off mute. He's done it himself.
I'm back.
Good stuff. So I'm going to leave you now, and we've got 2 amazing guests coming on next as we dive into the AFC East, and 2 interesting teams who are probably on different acts at the moment. So I'll say my see you later now, and see you in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
See you in a bit, Kev.
See you in a bit.
Yeah, so as Kez just mentioned, we're going to move on to the AFC East, and we're going to be covering the Dolphins and the Jets. And for this section, we're joined by a couple of great guests. We've got Andrew Mackens, who you can follow at Andrew Mackens on Twitter, and we've got Michael Duncan, who you can follow at MPDuncan75. How are you both doing, guys?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you both?
Not too bad. It's how many hours are we in now, Ali? So we're 6 hours in.
Yeah, I think 6 hours now.
I'm starting to tire already, and I've still got 10 to go. So
You guys are doing an awesome job.
Oh, we appreciate that. Thank you. And we're extremely excited to have you on representing the Undroppables. And so shall we crack straight on and get talking about a couple of these teams from the AFC East?
Let's do it. I'm ready to talk about any team that can continue to keep the Patriots out of the playoffs. Let's start with the Bills.
Well said.
The Bills.
So we're going to start with the Dolphins. Ali, do you want to throw a question over to get things kicked off?
Yes, it's a question about Tua. So with the off-season addition of Waddle and Fuller, does it bump Tua up in your dynasty rankings at all? So his current ADP is the quarterback 16.
I think the Dolphins have a really good thing going with Brian Flores at head coach, and adding in those wide receivers show they're continuing to give Tua the weapons he needs. And so I am pretty bullish on him. I know some of our fellow Undroppables are really bullish on him, and he's in that spot where he has an opportunity to make the year 2 jump, right? The same way like Kyler Murray made his, Lamar Jackson made his, Patrick Mahomes, obviously year 1 to year 2 is amazing, even though he wasn't playing in his rookie season. But I think Tua does have a lot of upside there, especially because he's still coming off of that major hip surgery that he had as well.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I think I might be more bullish on Tua than I thought I was, because I was looking back at some earlier startup drafts that I did before the NFL draft. So he's definitely moved down a little bit since then, just because guys like Trevor Lawrence and Trey Lance and everyone are in there. But I think I drafted him as like the quarterback 14. He was going ahead of guys like Tannehill and Wentz, and I love Carson Wentz, and Tannehill's been great, but his upside as a year 2 player, getting 2 really great weapons, along with the guys who are already there, Mike Gesicki and even Lynn Bowden. I think that he's got upside that people are kind of forgetting about because he was overshadowed by the Justin Herberts and the Joe Burrows of the world and this incredible rookie class. So I think that while he might not necessarily be moving up in my dynasty rankings, he's definitely a better value than a lot of guys. And I think that kind of lands him on my teams more often than not than some other guys.
Yeah, I think it's really tough when people are analysing Tua from what he's shown last year. I mean, I think people are forgetting he was coming off that hip injury that he got in college. He was thrown straight in at the deep end when Ryan Fitzpatrick got replaced by Tua. It was in a real tough stretch of games as well that he came in. And then we just mentioned the weapons that he has. I just think everything that was against him basically last year. And I don't know what you two think, but I think I saw enough in him in those few games to suggest that now he's got those improved weapons. I definitely think he can take a step forward and at least outperform. I mean, his ADP is QB 16 at the minute. For me personally, I think he could get right up towards at least a high-end QB2 in fantasy. So, yeah, I think I'm definitely going to bump him up a little bit, and I'm excited to see what he can bring next year. Ali, what do you think?
Yeah, again, like you've mentioned, he was overshadowed by Herbert and Burrow from last year's draft class. So it is a case of I think he's a good value at QB 16. I'm really happy if he's my QB 2. I think he can really build on what he started last season. I know it wasn't easy for him, but I think him, along with the Dolphins, can really take a step forward in 2021.
I think a huge thing there, too, is just because what they did with Ryan Fitzpatrick, like taking him out when he was struggling and not, forcing him into really tough situations because of the way they are building that organization. Like they didn't break him mentally either or break his confidence. They played it really safe, and now they've kind of taken the training wheels off, if you will. I think QB 16 you're drafting him at his floor, honestly. Yeah. I think anyone that's talking about him being a bust is not giving him enough credit. And with everything they're putting around him, you're drafting him at his floor. His ceiling could be top 5 if this offense is really humming. I mean, maybe some of the passing would be capped in terms of the run, like depending on how much they run the ball versus pass. But I think that still remains to be seen.
And I think people really underestimate what having actual wide receivers does for a quarterback. I mean, it sounds stupid, but like I watched Carson Wentz his rookie year when he was throwing to Dorial Green Beckham. I watched him in, even later in his career when he was throwing to Deontay Burnett. He was not in the NFL anymore. And the difference with these actual weapons that can run routes and get open and just make a quarterback's life just a tad easier. And, Devontae Parker's fine. I think that what we saw in his, 5th year is probably a little bit of a mirage. I don't think that's really what he is. I think he's much more what he showed us previously before that. But, giving him Jalen Waddle, who was his college target, and Will Fuller, who we've seen be an alpha, it's only going to help him. And I think Andrew's spot on. We're drafting him at his floor right now, and that makes him a fantastic value.
Yeah. He's definitely somebody I've been picking up in a lot of my leagues.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, he's gone from one of the worst situations at wide receiver in the NFL to now possibly a sort of top 7 or 8 wide receiver trio. It's a really good situation for him now. So, yeah, it's definitely his floor.
Yeah, so we'll move on. We've just spoke about a little bit the running game that they've got. I mean, Myles Gaskin, I don't know how he's done it, but he's managed to get through free agency and the NFL draft without any real serious competition coming in. So I'm interested to know what you two are thinking about him. Is he somebody you're looking to buy with that potential opportunity, or is he maybe someone you're looking to move on with all that hype that's around him at the minute?
So personally, I haven't really been doing either. I've gotten offers for him where I have him. I've drafted him in some startups. Actually, I got really good value on him, and I believe he's up like 3 rounds since I drafted him in startups. That was before the NFL draft. I've gotten offers. I don't think the offers have been enough that I'm willing to move on from what is more than likely a top 24 running back this season. But at the same time, I understand why no one wants to offer more. And if I was going to sell, I'm probably not getting the value that he's giving me this season. So he's like the definition of a hold for me. At least if I have any chance of competing, because I think more than likely it will be a 1-year type of deal with him. I don't think we can expect too much more than that. But if it gets to the point in season, I think that's when you're going to want to sell him, because you're going to get teams that are more willing to part with future draft capital because they think they're competing and they see a guy that at the very least can give them an RB2 for the playoffs. So.
Yeah, I'm right there with Michael. Something that he's kind of put me on to it, and I need to get better at, is the trading in season when, Myles Gaskin has 2-3 really good weeks to kick off the year. Someone's going to want him even more than what his value is right now. Because RB2, if his ADP in a startup is like RB25, then you're only going to get RB2 like value or capital out of him, which I don't think is much unless you're targeting some like 2nd year wide receiver, which that would bounce back, like a Denzel Mims or Bryan Edwards. And even then, someone might not want to make that trade, just given the nature of running back. But I'm really interested in Savon Ahmed as well. He's the guy who I believe was like 7th round pick behind Gaskin last year, had some decent games in relief of Gaskin when he got injured. So there's always a situation where it's like a next man up and Ahmed kind of takes over if Gaskin really struggles with staying healthy.
Yeah, and there was obviously Jared Dokes as well, who they just got in the draft. He's somebody that, with his size and his build, he's definitely got that build to be a starting running back in the NFL, and I think he can definitely take on a workload. And we've said with Gaskin, he was a 7th round pick himself. So I mean, all these guys they've not got high draft capital attached to him. So yeah, I think he's another guy that you could potentially keep an eye on. And I'm a bit like what you said, Michael, about if I am looking to move on from him, I'm looking to do it during the season. Hope he makes that hot start. All these guys, people like Mike Davis as well, is another great example that they've not really got that longevity attached to the team that they're on. But if they make a good start in fantasy, there's always going to be somebody looking for a starting running back. It's what we all crave in fantasy. You need those running backs, and with how volatile the position is, that's where you get your value when moving these guys mid-season. Ali, what's your feelings?
Yeah, well, I actually traded for Gaskin last night. I paid the 301 and 302 for him.
Bargain.
It wasn't anybody on the clock that I really wanted, and
in this draft, that's a steal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
There was obviously someone there that the guy wanted to take this year. Yeah. And I like you've all said that the hope is that he starts hot next season, or he has 2 or 3 games where he's producing good numbers, and then I'll try and flip him for a 2nd or something like that next year. So just trying to get the value out of him, really.
And we've seen for years with Chris Carson. I feel like he's just a prime example where, I had him and I sold him probably way too early because I didn't get a lot from him. And look at him now. But there's always the complete opposite where it's James Robinson, and a year later they draft a running back in the first round, and that's the volatility of this late round running back that was drafted. So your productivity could be Chris Carson, where perennially he's a value because no one wants to pay for him. But like you look at where he's going in startups, Myles Gaskin, like he's going ahead of Kenny Golladay, Robert Woods, Deontay Johnson, Julio Jones, Chase Claypool.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, I look at that
ridiculous.
too, and it's a head scratcher for me. But I had a different question for you, Michael, that maybe would explain it. Have you done anything with projections like around the level of running that the Dolphins want to do versus passing in previous seasons? Because Flores is a defensive-minded coach. Maybe some people think just on its face, we're going to play defense, we're going to run the ball, and that's going to give Gaskin more opportunities. And I think he saw a lot of receiving work as well. But I'm curious what your thoughts are just on like the offense and if they're going to be balanced, lean, run heavy, or something else.
I mean, leaning run heavy in the NFL nowadays is like a 60-40 split, I feel like, at the very least, leaning passing-wise, I mean. And I feel like that is on the heavier run side. And I get it. Like, Myles Gaskin was a workhorse for some reason while he was in there. So was Salvin Ahmed. I mean, I'm pretty sure if I was their only running back, I would be a workhorse. And that's, we can question that line of thinking all we want, but I understand why he's going there, but it's just, his value is so out of whack right now in terms of the startup value. And then, because I wouldn't draft him there. I would not draft him at the RB25, regardless of how much they're running. But at the same time, I know that he's going to be better than the RB25 if he starts the majority of the season. So it's very interesting to see where his value is falling right now.
No, definitely. I fully agree with that. But when you were just saying it, I think it's interesting that, as you say, he's the RB25. I believe that if he is the starter, I think he can quite easily do that. We've seen what he produced last year, and there's nothing there that suggests he can't do that. It's just the fact that with that draft capital, you start to worry about the longevity that it has. You just mentioned. Hopefully, is more like a Chris Carson than he is a James Robinson.
Sorry.
No,
they signed Malcolm Brown too. I just remembered.
Oh,
so that is not going to make things like easy to figure out in Miami.
Yeah, it is going to be one big mess. Just hopefully, like as we said, Gaskin gets that start, and then if you're not comfortable, you're going to get that opportunity to flip him early on in the season, and that's probably a move that I'd be making myself. So we'll move on to the wide receivers. Ali, what's your next question?
Yes, we'll move on to someone who's got really good draft capital. In Jalen Waddle. Is he somebody that you're looking to take in your rookie drafts? And do you think he becomes the number one receiver on this team? So his rookie ADP is the wide receiver 3, going at the 111 spot, and his overall ADP is the wide receiver 30 in round 8.
I think that's fair because he has a lot of unlimited upside. I think he's definitely worth a first-round rookie pick. I'll let Michael expound on that.
I have no shares of him, and I don't think I'm going to get any shares of him. I have him as my number 5 wide receiver, I believe. I have him behind, obviously, Chase, and then Smith, Moore, and Bateman. Moore being Elijah. I think he could be the wide receiver 1, but I also think that people are kind of undervaluing Will Fuller. And I know this is kind of jumping ahead in the show sheet a little bit, but like Will Fuller is 3 rounds after Waddle in startup drafts. He was a top 10 wide receiver. We've seen him be an alpha in an offense where there wasn't really a lot of other stuff going on. Yes, he was on PEDs. No, he has questions staying healthy, but we're talking as if Jalen Waddle doesn't have some of those same issues. Not the PEDs, but the healthy. So when it comes to Fuller and Waddle's younger, sure, and he has the draft capital, but Fuller's got the contract. I think it's a toss-up between the two, and if you're giving me Fuller plus 3 rounds, I'm taking Fuller all day. And in rookie drafts, I don't think I'll end up with Waddle at all.
Yeah, Andrew, what's your feelings on Waddle?
I think he's right there, man. One of our fellow undroppables, Justin Mandero, asked me the other day, who my wide receiver 2 was, and I looked at how I had traded up for Devonte Smith. Shout out Michael, because he's an Eagles fan. But Jalen Waddle went in the pick right after that, and I think the potential for that mind meld with Tua, as we alluded to before, is where a lot of his upside is built into. And if he's going to be on the Dolphins for the next 5 years, that like obviously minimum, that's the the goal. That's what we're projecting.
Yeah.
Then I think wide receiver 30 makes a lot of sense. He's like, I'm looking at our consensus dynasty rankings on our website. And he's at like wide receiver 38, but we've got some people that are higher on him, some that are lower. Two of our rankers have him at wide receiver 26 and 28 respectively. Yeah. So I think it's right there. It's just a matter of preference. And if you're thinking like the targets are going to be really spread out, like between Fuller and him and Parker, that could definitely cap his upside. But if Fuller is not around for long, I forgot the length of the contract, then Waddle's going to, you would think, earn more targets over time.
Yeah, I think Fuller's got the 1 year contract, hasn't he, in Miami? But yeah, with Waddle, he's somebody that I'm personally quite high on. I've got him as my wide receiver too in my rookie rankings. I think I'm buying into that upside. You just mentioned it briefly there, but I think with his yards after catchability, I just think it offers a lot to this offense that a lot of like Parker and Will Fuller don't really do. I know Will Fuller, he's going to be the field stretcher, and Parker's more the possession guy. Where I just think Waddle, I just think he's got that untapped potential that we've not quite seen. Obviously, he's struggled with injuries in college as well. But I'm kind of taking a little bit of a risk and taking a gamble that we've still yet to quite see the full potential that Waddle has, and that's why I'm probably slightly higher on him. And that's also why I'm bumping up Tua, because I just think with the ability that Waddle has and to make those extra yards, they're the kind of players that are ideal for your quarterbacks, especially ones that obviously Tua is a rookie and he had a tough first year. He's going to be a great safety valve for somebody like Tua, who then can go on and make the yards and make the fantasy points for Tua. So yeah, that's personally why I'm quite excited about Waddle. Ali, what do you think on Waddle?
Yeah, I've got him where his ADP is. He's my wide receiver 3 behind Smith, just ahead of Bateman. But I don't believe the news that all the gossip we heard that they wanted Waddle over Chase and he was always going to be the guy. I don't buy that one.
He was their number 2 on their board, apparently, right behind Lawrence.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So clearly, they obviously think really high of him. So if they're going to get the most out of him, then he has got that untapped potential. So maybe we're all a bit too low on him. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, and we're buying into Tua upside that we talked about already, right? So who's going to benefit from that if Tua does become, a top tier quarterback or a QB1 year in and year out? It's not going to be Lynn Bowden.
It's Lynn Bowden.
It's going to be Jalen Waddle.
It's Lynn Bowden.
Parker's going to be out. We don't know it. Will Fuller's a bit of a wild card. Waddle's like one of the more sure
wild
things.
Card, I get it.
No pun intended.
Yeah, just as you mentioned, that they've got that connection already, haven't they? I know when you talk about rookie wide receivers, you think it takes a while for them to adjust to the NFL and obviously the new quarterback. There's no new quarterback for Waddle. He's got his college quarterback, and I think that can definitely help him make a hot start. But we'll move on to the other wide receiver who we've just mentioned a little bit, Will Fuller, obviously bringing him in during free agency. So I just want to know what you two are thinking about Will Fuller when it comes to obviously moving from Houston to Miami. How do you see that affecting his potential ceiling? Do you see it as an improvement, or is it now a downgrade from obviously going from Deshaun Watson to Tua?
So all that said about Jalen Waddle just like 2 minutes ago, I love Will Fuller. I think Will Fuller was a screaming value last year, and he's screaming even louder as a value this year in 2021. I don't know what I feel like each year we don't know what it's going to be, but the past few years, it's what you get out of him is pretty much 6 games that are bust weeks. This last year because of suspension, before that, or for injury or whatever it might be. But when he's playing, he's amazing, and you want him in your lineup. And so I think if Tua does take that next step, that he will be able to connect on deep balls with Fuller, because that's what Will Fuller does, and he can catch a lot of those intermediate routes as well, especially if Devonte Parker is dead, like Kyle Larson said.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I think Fuller is just an incredible value. I will let people draft Jalen Waddle all they want. I will take Will Fuller, and I will get equal, even if it's just for 1 year, I will get basically equal value. I think that people still underrate Will Fuller. And obviously it sucks because he gets injured, with the exception of last year, but then there were the Peds. Funny how that works, but
hey, in Fuller's defense, I think a lot of these athletes get fed wrong information. They think they can take it, and then they find out that they couldn't.
Exactly.
And that's why they get hit with the suspension.
I have no clue if the Peds actually impeded or helped his ability to stay on or off the field as injuries are concerned. But the one thing that's interesting about a guy like Fuller comparatively to, say, like Deshaun Jackson maybe a few years ago or Hollywood Brown like earlier in the season is when he's on the field, he's performing. And the one thing that actually is an advantage is when he was injured, you're not starting him. It's not like he's going out there and busting. Mm-hmm. He's not going out there and beside the one time, I'm pretty sure that happened. He had like one catch for like 1 yard. But other than that, if he was on the field, he was producing. And when he's not on the field, you know that, and he's not in your lineup. He's never really giving you that zero in your lineup, which is a strategical advantage at the very least. And yeah, I think he's the wide receiver 46, I think you have. And that's just, you're telling me at wide receiver 46, I can get a guy that might give me 8 weeks as like a top 12 wide receiver. That's awesome. And going from Deshaun Watson to Tua is almost definitely a downgrade. And that's nothing against Tua. Deshaun Watson is just Deshaun Watson, all the other stuff aside. But I do think that he's incredibly talented, and he helped Deshaun Watson just as much as Deshaun Watson helped him. Like the splits in past years have been insane, even when DeAndre Hopkins was there. I mean, Deshaun Watson threw more touchdowns and threw more yards consistently when Will Fuller was on the field as opposed to when Will Fuller was not. And that was with one of the best wide receivers already on the field. So Will Fuller can do a lot of stuff for Tua, and I think that he's going to be able to produce on his own no matter how well that offense is functioning. So that's my thought.
Yeah. Ali, what do you think on Fuller?
I just think it's a screaming buy, wide receiver 46. It actually shocks me to see him being that low. He's definitely going to be a guy that I'm going to be targeting this offseason. I think the offense as a whole will take a step forward. Will Fuller has been producing fringe wide receiver 1 numbers when he's been on the field. So, and he's also not that old. What is he? 26, 27?
27, I believe.
27. So he's still got 3 or 4 more years in him. So I think he's a screamer by wide receiver 46 for sure.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think Will Fuller's my dynasty cheat code because as you just mentioned, it's every offseason. Everyone seems to be low on him. This is when I'm picking him up. I'll keep him and then I'll trade him mid-season for that inevitable either an injury or obviously with the suspension, move him on, and then I'll just recycle and I'll grab him again in the offseason when everyone's down on him. It's every year, as you said, there's a reason why people are down on him, and then the potential upside. We keep saying upside with Waddle, but Will Fuller as well. The games that you've got him, it can be unbelievable, and he showed it last year when, as you say, with the performances he put in Houston. So he's definitely somebody that I'll always be targeting every off season. It feels like I can get him at a value. So yeah, definitely somebody I'm looking to grab in dynasty. So we'll move on to the tight end position, Ali.
Yeah, so Dolphins, they drafted productive tight end Hunter Long. How much do you think it affects Mike Gesicki's dynasty value? Gesicki's going as the tight end 10 in startups in the 11th round.
So I don't feel super strongly on this, but I know Michael, he produces a podcast for us called The Undrafted. It's hosted by @Dino Game Theory, also known as Jax Falcone. And Jax hates Mike Gesicki.
He threw him off a bridge.
Yeah, he likes to say metaphorically throwing him off a bridge.
I don't know if it's metaphoric anymore.
He may be sour on him as a target for 2020 because of just his overall lack of efficiency. And if you did have Gesicki last year, I think he was just an absolute headache because he had games where he completely disappeared, whether that was because of the quarterback situation or just because they were, targeting guys like Durham Smythe in the offense. and now they bring in Hunter Long, which is going to make it more confusing. I mean, you talk about tight ends, they always take a long time to kind of get their footing in the NFL. And it's not like Hunter Long is Kyle Pitts. So I think it's just a real quagmire here. I don't like it either way.
Quagmire. Good use of that word. Yeah, I loved Hunter Long pre-draft. In a lot of rookie drafts that I was doing, like mocks or whatever, he was often like a guy I was taking in like the 5th round where I think I saw a lot of upside. It seemed like he was being undervalued. apparently the NFL agreed with me and they drafted him pretty high. Miami liked him. But now I just kind of hate both of them. Like, I'll still take Hunter Long if he's there as a value in like the 4th or 5th round of a rookie draft, because honestly, like after the first like 18 guys, I don't really know if there's really anyone that I want. So ideally I'm trading away all of my picks and it's fine, but like I will happily take Hunter Long, but I don't really want Hunter Long or Mike Gesicki, and I don't want to have to depend on them, I think is a better way to put it. Like I will happily keep one on my bench and hope for future upside, more preferably probably Hunter Long. But like, you know, everything we look for in a tight end when they're coming out is Mike Gesicki. And obviously he has not produced to that level. He's been in kind of some weird positions in Miami, and he's had stretches where he's been pretty dominant, but you know, he's an athletic freak. He produced in college, came from a good program. Everything that you could possibly want was him. So I feel like there's always going to be that hope for untapped potential, and maybe that just means that you get a better value on him if you're trading him away. But he's definitely not someone that I want as my tight end one, because I think that if Hunter Long eats into his value even a little bit, along with, you know, Will Fuller, Jalen Waddle, and yes, Lynn Bowden, what is he really giving you?
Yeah, I agree. I think for me personally, I see Waddle as being a big impact on Gesicki. Obviously, we know Gesicki played a lot in the slot last year. So with somebody like Waddle coming in who played predominantly in the slot for Alabama, I do think that is going to affect Gesicki, and he's going to get moved to that more traditional tight end position. And I mean, the big draw towards Gesicki was the fact that he was getting in that slot role and getting those targets. So for me, that's probably why I'm definitely starting to fade Gesicki moving into 2021. Ali, what do you think about Gesicki?
Yeah, I was one of the fools that bought the hype last off season, and he was disappointed. Even when injuries striked, I kind of thought Gesicki was in for a decent role mid-season, but it never really happened. So just adding Hunt along to the equation, I'm going to be out on both of these now. He's in that dynasty, that tight end wasteland where it's really difficult to see who's going to produce in that tight end sort of 6 to 18 range is really difficult, and Gesicki definitely falls into that category.
Yeah, definitely. When he's tight end 10 as well in the startup ADP rankings, I think that's the kind of area where you're not too excited, are you, to go and grab somebody like you? I'd much rather wait and address other needs, wide receiver, running back, and then target a tight end later on.
Yeah, and I think something you said about the tight end wasteland, I think, is a really important distinction, because I feel like he used to be in that, because I feel like there's like kind of 3 tiers of tight ends almost, where it's the top couple of guys that you really hope you can get, you know, top 3 value in, and maybe that ends with like TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, around there sort of. Then after that, it's just, you know, like 30 guys that are kind of divided into, okay, you're going to be the tight end 5 through 15, but you have very little upside. And that's probably I think the prime examples of that are Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith now. And then you've got, you know, after that, it's kind of the guys where, okay, I'm going to draft you. You're probably going to be in that same range, but maybe you're Irv Smith or Adam Troutman, where you could have that upside eventually. And I feel like with the drafting of Hunter Long and also just his career, Mike Gesicki has moved from that possible upside category to the, well, I guess you're just going to forever be a tight end, back end 1, top tight end 2, which isn't really that helpful. So
yeah, I think we've made this joke all the way through the streamathon so far when we get to the tight end position, but it's get the top few guys, and then beyond that, it's probably just fade the position for as long as possible and start throwing them darts later on and hope you hit somebody that's got a bit of upside to them.
Yeah, it's like Mike was saying, like you really are chasing the upside, because we've got it on our rankings page for Dynasty, like the 7, 8, 9 tight ends are Noah Fant, Dallas Goedert, Irv Smith. I think all players we think are good, but haven't taken the next step yet. And then Jax, who hates Gesicki, census
he does.
Tight end 12 for us, but he's got Gesicki at 18.
That's higher than I thought it would be.
And he's got other guys who are relatively untapped, like Adam Troutman at 11, Blake Jarwin at 15. He's got Cole Kmet at 16. So those are guys where you're just also chasing upside, but we haven't seen as much as maybe the top 10 ranked guys.
Yeah. I think the general feeling that we've come up with is the wide receivers we're happy to target. Tua, we think it can bounce back, but I think we're fading the running backs potentially and definitely the tight ends.
I mean, after the first 3 rounds, just draft wide receivers for the rest of your draft.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we'll move on to the next team we're going to talk about, and that's the New York Jets. Ali, do you want to kick things off?
Yeah, here we go. So Zach Wilson is going to be the day one starter, and he's also dual threat quarterback. So what do you see ceiling being in year one under new coach Robert Saleh? So put in perspective, he's the rookie QB4, and in startups, he's going as the QB 21 in early round 6.
Andrew, any strong feelings?
I think we got to tamper our expectations a little bit. I know Kyle Larson, one of our guys, loves him. He just changed his Twitter profile picture to Zach Wilson, and I thought it was him for a second. They're around the same age, but anyway,
both very punchable faces.
Wilson is a rookie. What I do like is that they're bringing in the new coach, the new system, new quarterback. They're all in lockstep in that way. But there's no way there's not growing pains in this offense turning over from Adam Gase. I think it's going to look gross from a stats perspective in 2021. It'll probably be something weird 25 touchdowns and 13 interceptions or something in those ranges. Because they'll be throwing, they'll be behind. maybe 25 is even a lot. But
I was going to say that might be generous on both ends. And that's
if he's such a good dual threat QB, maybe it'll be 25 total touchdowns. So he runs for 3 of those or something. But yeah, those aren't numbers that really get us excited when it comes to QB production. If he runs like crazy and we just see this Konami code come out of him, then people will start to, I think, either want to trade for him, or if it's redraft, they'll even pick him up in the right situation. But yeah, year one, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And obviously this is very dynasty focused, but in redraft, don't draft him. Don't do it. Just don't. I'm saying that now. Rookie quarterbacks really don't produce in fantasy very often, and it takes a literal historical season for them to be extremely fantasy relevant, like Justin Herbert, who set rookie records, and he was still, I think, barely a QB1. Zach Wilson, he's dual threat, but he's nowhere close, in my opinion, to the level of Justin Fields or Trey Lance, where, Trey Lance could already be a top 3 rushing quarterback in the NFL just by walking onto a field because he's that talented. And Justin Fields is not far behind. Zach Wilson can move with his legs, but I think and don't hear what I'm not saying, but I think he's much more similar to Aaron Rodgers or Mahomes, where he can move when he needs to. And yeah, he can pick up a first down. He can grab a rushing touchdown, but I don't think he's going to be breaking Lamar Jackson's rushing record anytime soon. But yeah, it's a new offense. It's a young offense. It's still rebuilding. Zach Wilson does not strike me as extremely pro ready. And, I'm sure I said a lot of these things about Justin Herbert last year, so can't wait to be wrong. But I don't think he's going to walk out there light the world on fire.
The thing for me, I think QB4 makes sense. But what was so funny is I think pre-draft, I was this guy, there's no way this guy is ready after just torching Mountain West teams, et cetera. But then as soon as he was drafted to the Jets and we're oh, this is real. This is reality now.
Yeah.
You're going to get to evaluate him in year one. He's taking all the snaps. And I think that kind of builds up to well, what if he is really good? And you start to maybe put him in a friendlier position than pre-draft.
And Dynasty, I think he's a value, but I think, just because I'm going to keep comparing him to Justin Herbert because I didn't like Herbert last year and I was wrong. But, and I don't think he is Justin Herbert, by the way. He is way too punchable of a face for me. But
I drafted Wilson at the end of the second round of a 1 QB rookie draft. I didn't know how to feel about it after Michael torched me on you don't need 1 QB. You don't need QBs in a 1 QB league, but
a little bit.
It is what it is.
But also, Zach Wilson does not have Keenan Allen. And I think that's something that I've kind of really tried to hone in on with these young rookie quarterbacks that aren't necessarily as ready as some other guys. Like, he doesn't have Keenan Allen, he doesn't have Austin Eckler. He has Denzel Mims, Corey Davis, Jamison Crowder, and Elijah Moore. They might be talented, that's awesome, but they're not Keenan Allen, who's one of the best route runners in the league and can, really, like, if you throw him 170 targets, that's good. Like, I don't want to give Corey Davis 170 targets. That's not good. And I really think it's that simple for Zach Wilson, at least in his first year. His first year.
I think that's what I was just going to say myself, that as big as fan as I am of Denzel Mims and also Elijah Moore, I like both those wide receivers. They're not Keenan Allen. You're definitely right there. And I just think that the one draw maybe when you're in your rookie drafts, a super flex rookie draft, he's going to be the starter week one. That is a given fact, because they've only got a couple of McDonald's staff working behind him on that depth chart. So he is a guaranteed starter week one. And that is the only way in for me, that if he can just make a good start, people are going to desire him because of that. And that would be my only reason why I would target him. But like you both said, I think he's my QB4 in my rookie rankings, and he's somebody I'm not super excited to get. He's going at the 107. I'm not excited to get him, but he is a starting NFL quarterback. So,
and he's going to have a long leash. Drafted second overall in a new regime.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. So with that, we'll move on to another rookie, and someone's going to get excited, because if you two know me, I am a big Michael Carter fan, and this was all before that. Don't pin me down as one of these guys that's obsessed with the landing spots or anything. I'll tell everybody I've been high on Carter for a while, but I couldn't talk about the New York Jets running backs and not at least mention Michael Carter. But yeah, they drafted him in the 4th round, and I'm interested to know what you think about this backfield. Obviously, there's Ty Johnson, Tevin Coleman, and the Michael Piran there as well. How do you see it playing out in 2021?
I mean, he could be Devin Singletary 2.0.
He's been trying to push that narrative for so long.
In 2021, or in his rookie year, Devin Singletary was not bad for fantasy purposes. I'm just putting that out there. Putting that out there.
I mean, not bad is not what I'm aiming for, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm fine pigeonholing myself as, like, I'm a lot more bullish on Michael Carter's opportunity with the Jets because of the landing spot, because like Tevin Coleman's like reunited with Mike LaFleur and I guess Saleh, but Tevin Coleman has really struggled to stay healthy throughout the past couple of years. So I don't know if he's just going to take over in this backfield competition. You might have mentioned it already, like LaMichael Pirine. Is that competition? I think at worst, he's like, at worst, I think Carter has this opportunity to be like a J.D. McKissick or a Nyheim Hines type thing. And it might not happen in year one, but if they're giving him the third down work, then that's really promising for dynasty purposes.
Yeah, and I mean, Tevin Coleman was also reunited with Kyle Shanahan, and I don't know if it really means that much. I think he's dust. Your running backs fall off early-ish, and they fall off very quickly, and I think there's a good chance that Tevin Coleman is toward the end of his career, and obviously he's with a coach that's familiar, but I think that's more for the coach than it is the player. Like new coaches, when they bring in when they go to a new team, they like to bring in guys that they know are familiar with the way that they do things, because it helps the younger players on the team. It helps it helps build the idea of what they're trying to do in that new regime. And I think that's probably Tevin Coleman's role, is just trying to kind of make sure that, if he needs someone on the field that he knows exactly what's going to do, that's Tevin Coleman. And that's fine. I don't think that's a big deal for fantasy. But Michael Carter, I think, is by far the most talented guy on that in the running backfield, and I don't think it's particularly close. Michael Pirine's fine, but I think Michael Carter should easily be able to get significant work, and he's probably an RB2 in 2021. Who knows what happens beyond that, but we've seen much less talented guys get more work and be very fantasy relevant.
So I'll jump in quickly here. You may have seen my reaction, but I'm checking like our site rankings as we go, and our rankers have Michael Carter as the consensus RB28 in Dynasty. That's way higher than I expected.
Okay.
Yeah, in Dynasty. But I think that makes sense as I'm looking at it, because, when we talk about these running backs, they're in their prime years right now when they joined the NFL. So there's a lot of upside built into that, in my opinion. But he's got the opportunity to earn the opportunity. So.
No, fully. Ali, do you want to add anything else? Because I'll get told off if I talk about Carter too much. So Ali, I'll let you have the final word on Carter.
Yeah, I have manifested a bit of a hatred for Michael Carter just because of your love for him.
Because of me, yeah, I know.
But as a prospect, I actually do really like him. He's definitely, as you said, most talented running back in this running back room. So I'm personally out on all the running backs because, I'll wait and see how they're going to be used. But if I'm going to take a shot on one, it probably will be Michael Carter. And the running back 37, his ADPs represents quite a bit of value for me. So I quite like him, and it is potential for him to lead a bit of a committee on that team.
And if we are thinking that this is going to be a Kyle Shanahan type offense, I mean, Michael Carter in space and getting these open looks where they've designed him to be open, that's exactly what I'd want for Michael Carter. I don't want him being the grinder that's trying to run through the tackles all the time. Like, I would love to see him in that Kyle Shanahan type offense. I think that's going to maximize a lot of his ability. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think, in all honesty, it's probably one of the best landing spots he could have landed in. I mean, obviously, everybody wanted that San Francisco landing spot, but this is San Francisco point two for me. Basically, I think it's going to be very similar to that style of offense, and as you say, I think he fits into that kind of offense perfectly. So we'll move on to the wide receivers and talk a little bit more about the wide receivers. Ali, what's your question to the guys?
Yes, just interested to see who you see is finishing as the wide receiver one on the Jets in 2021. Obviously, you got Mims, Davis, Elijah Moore, or Jamison Crowder, who could be cut. Who's your favorite of these to own in Dynasty as well?
Andrew, any strong feelings?
So this is interesting to me because I keep looking at this and I'm a little surprised by some of the ADP, but ultimately, if he doesn't get cut, it should be Jamison Crowder is like the wide receiver, the number one wide receiver on this team, right? So that would be, that would kill Elijah Moore's 2021, at least we think. I don't know how many 4 wide receiver sets we expect the team to run, but I think that could be interesting given, their potential to spread it across all 4 of these guys. I want to see it from Mims. We saw a little bit. We saw some flashes, and I think he's, if you think he's got it, like the talent, then he's the alpha guy. He's the X receiver, would receive the goal line fades and the third down. Like you need a third down catch. Like you could go to him. I mean, you could go to a slot receiver too, and a slant or something, but. I don't know if it's just going to turn like that for Mims. He would be like the one I'd be the most excited about if we're talking like shoot for the moon. But yeah, wide receiver 1 in 2021. Right now, it technically is Crowder until he gets cut.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that you laid that out is exactly how I feel about it. Like, who is the wide receiver 1 for the Jets in 2021? I don't think I care. I don't want any of them. Short term. Because, again, like I've already kind of detailed what I think about Zach Wilson's 2021. And if he's not going to be fantasy relevant as a quarterback, I don't think that any of the wide receivers are really going to make too much of a difference. Jamison Crowder, he probably is the wide receiver 1 if he's the guy that they're going to be putting on if he becomes like a safety blanket of sorts for Zach Wilson, the more experienced, Keenan Allen, light type of thing. That's great, and I like that, but probably not enough for fantasy. So when we talk Dynasty, I think that the guys that I would prefer to own are Moore and Mims, which is kind of, obvious, but Mims is what, was it 2 rounds later?
Yeah, I believe
so. Yeah, 14th round. 14th
round, that's crazy good value. And I'm in love with 4 rounds later than Moore. I'm in love with Moore. He was one of my favorite pre-draft guys. I don't really care how tall he is. I think that he reminds me a lot of T.Y. Hilton in the way that he can dominate. He's a great route runner. And I think long term, I think Moore and Zach Wilson are going to be very good for each other and be able to grow with each other. But the value that Mims is at wide receiver 60, I think is something I would probably end up with a lot of Mims at this point.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when it comes to somebody like Moore, because I think at the minute a lot of people are getting excited about Moore, but it is down to the fact that you're hoping Crowder gets cut. I mean, we all think it's going to happen, but if it doesn't happen, then we're talking about a guy that might barely see the field as a rookie. I mean, I was high on Denzel Mims last when he came in as a rookie. I think he's somebody that potentially be excited to see how he develops with Zach Wilson. I mean, we've all just said we're not super high on Wilson, but I think he's an upgrade at least on Sam Darnold. So
and Adam Gase is gone, which is an upgrade.
Exactly, yeah. So a lot of these signs are pointing towards a potential, at least improvement from Denzel Mims. So as you both said, he's probably the guy that I gravitate the most towards, and based on the current ADPs as well, it feels like a great value.
Yeah, I think just a quick cut in there is like Moore is obviously, because he's the rookie, he's the new hotness, and his potential is untapped. We haven't seen anything in the NFL, so people are, in this case, I think, overdrafting him. Whereas like Denzel Mims is on playerprofiler.com, his best comparable is Chris Godwin. And so, I mean, that might be saying a lot, but if, like you were saying, if Crowder's there, maybe not all of these wide receivers in their rookie year can be Justin Jefferson. Elijah Moore might end up being under Crowder and kind of learn from him to learn what they want in like a slot receiver in this offense. So.
Yeah, definitely. So we spoke a little bit about the wide receivers. We'll talk about the guy that was added in free agency, and that was Corey Davis. I'm interested to know what you feel in regards to him coming from Tennessee. Do you see this as an upgrade for him now coming to the New York Jets, or is it now a downgrade leaving Tennessee and joining the Jets?
So I'm a Titans fan, actually, which is why I'm going to go first, Michael.
Yeah. You're good. I'll go first about Chris Herndon.
I think the Titans really messed this up. They declined his fifth-year option, and then when they were getting a really efficient offense going with Arthur Smith, behind play action, all these things, Corey Davis started to thrive as an actual number 2 option next to A.J. Brown. And I think, they're maybe not every week exactly, but there's a potential for him to finish as like a wide receiver 2, or just in the wide receiver 2 range in the Titans offense. But now he's getting thrown amongst all these other guys. So I think this is a total downgrade. You see it in the ADP. He's not like a Stephon Diggs going to Buffalo or a DeAndre Hopkins going to Arizona. And so I think it's going to be really hard for Corey Davis to do anything close to what he did last year, because, Denzel Mims is not A.J. Brown yet either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. It's like he was the obvious number 2 option in an offense that really didn't even have a third option. And now maybe he's the first option, and maybe that's good enough for some fantasy relevance. But we've all agreed that Zach Wilson is probably not going to be supporting very much. So even if he's the number 1 option, I don't think it matters that much.
He's not good enough to be the number 1 option, though.
Exactly.
That's like what he proved the first 3 years of his career.
Yeah, so I just, it's a downgrade. And even if it's not, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I think I agree as well. I mean, the role that he had in Tennessee, it seemed perfect for somebody like Davis, obviously sitting alongside A.J. Brown. He came on and he was fantastic in Tennessee. So I feel like that kind of helped him a little bit. Obviously, he had the struggles, and he was always a guy that a lot of people were super high and kept clinging on to the hope that he could finally break out. And as you said, it did start to look a lot better in that final season in Tennessee. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he fits into this offense we've just spoke about. I feel like it is going to be a lot like San Francisco and using that run game and using that as their advantage. So, in all honesty, they're not really a group of wide receivers you're super excited to get. Is there anybody that you potentially, what would you offer in terms of like rookie picks to get any of these guys? Are any of them worth second round picks to you?
Denzel Mims and Elijah Moore are. Mm-hmm. They're the only 2, period, I think, that I'm interested in acquiring.
If Elijah Moore is not playing in the early season, half of the season, like I would go and spend that 2022 second round pick on Elijah Moore, because he is like, what for you, Michael, like a back of the first rookie pick.
He's between my wide receiver 3 and 4. I have him neck and neck with like Devonte Smith and Bateman. I love Moore, so yeah. I'm all in on him. Not for 2021, but like going forward long term, maybe back half of 2021.
I'm definitely rooting for Mims. I don't have him in a lot of leagues, but if he starts to show a little more at the beginning of the season and Zach Wilson is targeting him a lot, I'd like to see if I could give a second for him for sure.
Yeah.
Because right now I would only give like a third probably.
Yeah.
I think Moore could potentially be a guy you could get quite cheap next year if, as we say, if Crowder ends up sticking around. I think you're going to be getting a great value on somebody. If they start panicking, they only start panicking that he's not seeing the field with Crowder there. He's definitely a guy that I'd be grabbing and thinking further on 2022 season and reaping the rewards that we've seen in college and what he can be. And with that, we'll move on to the final part, and that's the tight end position. Ali, what's your question to the guys?
Yeah, so it's about Chris Herndon. So do you ever see Chris Herndon becoming fantasy relevant? And do you have him stashed anywhere? His ADP is the tight end 32, which surprised me, going in the 18th round.
It surprised you that he's not going higher, or that he's actually on the board?
Well, it seems every offseason it's Chris Herndon season, so it's never become a thing yet. But he's obviously the tight end one on the team, so.
This season is Chris Herndon's season.
We actually have a joke at the inside joke at the Undroppables that kind of our friend at Polly Sleepers was talking about him a lot the previous years, and now Chris Herndon just doesn't exist. So to answer your question, do I see him ever becoming fantasy relevant? No. Do I have him stashed anywhere? No. I don't think so. I think it's possible. It's entirely possible, but I'm not. It's really hard for me to see it. We talked about all these wide receivers that I'm way more interested in, as like to pick a flyer on than Herndon, and I think Kenny Yeboah as an undrafted free agent for the Jets is a really interesting addition as well. I think he's going to be hungry to make the team. And he should smell blood in the water here, like seeing that, Chris Herndon hasn't been able to solidify his role in the offense. Like if I were Kenny Yeboah, I'd be like, I could start for this team if I work really hard and earn my keep.
Yeah.
I do have Chris Herndon stashed. I have him in my longest dynasty league, my home dynasty league. My team name is the Tight End Factory because I've constantly had to trade for tight ends because I've had absolute garbage. Partly because I depended on Chris Herndon for an entire season, and it was not the one where he was good. But yes, it is possible, and that's because Adam Gase is gone. We've seen time and time again that Adam Gase leaves or people leave Adam Gase and they get better. I think Chris Herndon is going to be better. Now, Chris Herndon being better could put him at like the tight end 24. That's very possible. But he could also be like the tight end 8. And that's still not great. But, I'm still excited about that because I'm team Chris Herndon. I think it cost adjusted. I would rather have Herndon than Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder. Okay. I would rather hedge my bets on that, knowing how the Kyle Shanahan system, going all the way back to Jordan Reed, likes to use tight ends. That being said, I also have Kenny Yeboah. I also have a couple shares of him. I think that a tight end will be used in that offense, and I think especially with a young quarterback, I think they will gravitate toward, just generally speaking, they'll gravitate toward tight ends. So could it be Chris Herndon? Yes. He's shown that he can do it at the NFL level, which is something that Kenny Yeboah has not done. It's probably not likely, but I'm all in. And by all in, I'm like kind of in. Sort of.
You're hopeful.
I'm hopeful.
Yeah, it is an interesting player. Obviously, the opportunity that he's got is annoying because he's one of those players that you keep seeing flashes. It keeps luring you in, and then the inevitable disappointment. But I do agree. He's got that opportunity potentially of seeing a great uptick in his usage and his production in fantasy. You've just mentioned that I think the system's gonna fit well for whichever tight end it is, and I'm banking on that being Herndon, and as well the quarterback with the rookie quarterback. As you say, they're the guys that tend to go for the short passes, the easier passes as they adjust to the NFL, and tight end somebody that tends to be a guy that reaps the rewards of that. So I can fully understand why you've got some hope for Herndon. Again, just talking about those late flyers, when it comes to the tight end position. He's definitely a guy that you can target super late. Probably don't have to draft him in your startups. You can pick him up off your waivers. I just think he's got as good a chance as any for me of those guys at that ADP that can at least become a tight end one. Because as we say, it's not really all that hard work, is it, to become a tight end one? So yeah, that brings us to the end of talking about the Jets and the Dolphins. So just wanted to say a massive thank you for you both coming on and having a chat with us about these two teams. Really appreciate you giving us your time. And is there anything else you want to plug, or let us know where we can catch you on Twitter?
I'm just at Andrew Mackins, and then at the Undroppables is our Twitter, where we tweet out like all of our articles and things like that. So if you are focused in fantasy football Twitter, I think those are the main places, and you can see Michael's Twitter below him as well.
We recently put out a rookie draft guide at the Undroppables. Go check that out on our website. It's on our Twitter. It's got a ton of information about how to approach your rookie drafts and that kind of stuff. We're doing a lot of awesome stuff at the Undroppables, so come check us out, come follow along, and thank you for having us.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I think the charity thing is awesome, man. Like, I'm going to be giving to your charity. I think it looks like you guys are pretty close to the target already. Yeah. So I'll apologize in advance. I don't know if my American dollar will go as far as the British pound, but I know every pound counts. So
absolutely, yeah. No, we really appreciate that. Yeah, as I say, thanks for giving us your time, and hopefully we can chat again soon and chop it up again.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
Thank you. Enjoyed that.
Yep. Take care, guys.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, you as well.
What's up?
Right. So that was the end of that section. Now I think we're a little bit ahead of time, and we're just waiting for Marvin to come in. I've just seen him drop into the lobby. But yeah, we're going to move on to the next section, where we're going to stay in the AFC East and talk about the Patriots and the Bills. And as I say, we've got two great guests coming on. They're from the Dynasty Nerds, and we're happy to welcome Marvin Eloquin, who you can follow on Twitter at FF_Marvin E, and also Jacob Vine, who you can follow on Twitter at JSnake_DFF. How you both doing, guys?
I'm good.
Hey, doing well. Excited to be here to talk some Patriots and Bills. Should be fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, been looking forward to getting you both on. Sorry I put you under a little bit of pressure there, didn't I, Marvin? We finished a little earlier than we were expecting on that last one, but you've come in just in time and perfect timing. So thank you. And shall we kick things straight off and get into the first team?
Yeah, let's do it.
Love it. So we're going to start with the New England Patriots. Ali, have you got a question to kick things off for the guys?
I have, yeah. So it features the two quarterbacks, Mac Jones, who's the ADP, the quarterback 24, and Cam Newton, who's going a bit later at 29. So do you see any value in either of these at draft costs?
I'll go ahead and start with this one. I see value in Mac Jones, honestly. Like, he's a first-round drafted QB. He's really given me some Daniel Jones, Justin Herbert vibes with where his ADP is related to rookie drafts, being a late first, early second-round pick that a lot of people are fading. And honestly, I think his ADP will rise just naturally because, as you said, he's QB 24 right now, going in the late sixth round. But for Cam, I'm not really feeling it. And I know Marvin and I typically agree more often than not. So hopefully we have some disagreements here every once in a while. But I think Cam will be an okay QB for 3 to 4 weeks. But in general, I'd rather have like any of the wide receivers around there in the 11th round.
Yeah, and I hate to disappoint you, Jacob, but we do agree. I think I like Mac Jones quite a bit, and to your point, the value that he is in super flex drafts, where I've seen him like drop into the early second, maybe even, and that at that point you take him. Like, it doesn't matter what other receivers there. You probably, well, depends who's there, but Mac Jones is probably the pick. And one of the more accurate quarterbacks in college last season, has the second best career passing yards per attempt, adjusted career passing yards per attempt I believe in college football history. And if not, that would be the Sports Reference's database, so that it's pretty good. He's pretty good. He's pretty accurate. And I just like what he brings to this team. Now, what I like about their ADPs is you could theoretically grab both of them, right? You could back up Mac with Cam, who will probably start a few games, but I do think the future here is Mac Jones. And it's always possible Cam latches on to a different team, and so he does still have some dynasty value. So it doesn't hurt to grab both. Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting situation for me because I think Cam Newton, I believe he's going to come into the season with a bit of chip on his shoulder. Everybody's been down on him after what we saw last year, but we know there was a lot of things that worked against Cam last year, obviously with the COVID situation, him actually getting it himself. I know he came out and said that affected his play, and I'm happy to believe that. And also as well, coming off the injury that he had leading into the season, I just think it was tough for him as well, the lack of preseason games coming into this new system. I just think he's going to have that bit of a chip on his shoulder, and I think there's a chance that he's going to start week 1. I don't know when you guys think he'll hand on the baton to Mac Jones, but I think if he can make a steady start, he could be the quarterback for half a season, maybe right up until the Patriots are out of the picture of getting into the playoffs. But in regards to Mac Jones, is a guy that, again, we've just mentioned it a little bit earlier about Zach Wilson. Is when you're grabbing him in your rookie drafts, in your Superflex rookie drafts, is a guy that you're going to get in that second round. You're not going to be excited to get somebody like Mac Jones. Or I know I'm personally not super high on Mac Jones, but it's the right choice to make in a Superflex league. We're getting a young quarterback that he's going to be the starter, whether it is week 1 or during the season or even potentially 2022. But he's going to get that shot. He's a first-round quarterback. He's guaranteed to at least get the shot. So, yeah, I think he's a potential great value in your rookie drafts. The one thing that for me personally, that why I'm not super high on Mac Jones is it's that rushing, and I know it's a tough one when you're talking about fantasy because we want all the rushing quarterbacks and then everybody else we tend to fade. But with Mac Jones, we're all saying he's on the Patriots. He could be the next Tom Brady, but I mean that's a high caliber player we're talking about that we need Mac Jones to be a great quarterback. And even then, Brady, one of the best ever, and he's now he is not one of the top quarterbacks, but he's a very good QB1. So for me, that's just the one thing that holds me back on getting too excited about Mac Jones. But as I say, the potential opportunity there is fantastic. Ali, what's your feelings on Mac Jones?
So we talk about two polar opposite quarterbacks, someone that can run but can't throw very well, and then you've got the opposite in Mac Jones. I'm not sure when Jones comes in. I think Bill was pissed at what happened last season, and they have upgraded their wide receivers and tight ends especially. So I think if Cam does start, he's going to have a few more weapons to play with. He literally had nobody last year. And I think he's got his earmark that week 4 match with Brady. I think there's no chance that Mac Jones is going to start that game. I think that it'll be Cam for the first sort of 6 weeks of the season. See how they go. I think they've got a really easy start in the fixtures, so it could be a game where that both teams are 3-0 coming into that. So that could be a really good game. But yeah, at the ADPs, like you say, you could potentially grab both of these, and then at least you've secured that quarterback room.
Yeah. What do you two think about when do you think Mac Jones is a starter? Do you think it could potentially be the week 1 starter?
I don't. I would expect it to be 3-4, maybe longer if they start winning games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I believe they're trying to trade up to get him. But I'm not sure how confident they were in getting him anyways. I think they waited, they got him. And so I think at this point they're not going to rush him in. He's not like a top 5 drafted quarterback like some of the ones, in this rookie class. So I think they're going to be patient with him. I think they're a smart team. They won't rush him in. And, I definitely think it's still worth the wait though. And like you said, quarterbacks are so valuable in Superflex league. So you just grab him anyways, because he'll be a starter at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add about Cam real quick is there was a trade I saw maybe 2 weeks ago, and it was like Cam Newton and a droppable player for another like droppable player. So you can get Cam really cheap in leagues that are currently like they're not going through the draft. So you could get him. You may be able to do a 2022 third and a 2024 third or something like that, or 2023 third. Like you could get him really cheap, and you could get a starter, especially if you need a QB.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you mentioned at the start, I think even if he's not the starter in New England, say mid-season, he's still not. I don't think he's done. I think he could still potentially be a starter for somebody else in 2022. So I just say, Jacob, if you can get him just as a throw-in, that feels like it's just money, isn't it? It's ideal. And yes, you just got to wait for your rewards basically when it comes to Cam Newton. So talking of guys that can run the ball, we'll move on to the running backs. We've got obviously Damian Harris, Sony Michel, and then they picked up the 4th round rookie pick, Ramondre Stevenson, and they also re-signed James White. I'm interested to know, is there any running back in this backfield that you would be targeting in Dynasty, or is it one that you're just going to avoid? Because obviously we know the headache that we've had in previous years when it comes to Patriots running backs. So yeah, is there anybody that you're at least tempted to grab in Dynasty?
Yeah, I can jump in here. It's my initial gut is to avoid all of them, but at some point there's going to be some value, right? I mean, my initial reaction would be to go with the guy that has the lowest ADP, and it seems like right now that's Ramondre Stevenson and James White. But White is on a 1-year contract, I believe. I don't think he's a long-term option there. Obviously, he's getting older. Stevenson does have some upside because of his size. He can be a receiver as well. And Michelle, they declined his 5th-year option, so he likely won't be there next year. That's why I sort of lean Harris, even though he has the higher ADP. And what he did last year, I mean, he was pretty solid. He was the lead running back. I mean, he was great at creating yards for himself, RB9 yards created per touch, RB8 and evaded tackles per touch. So he was elusive, had some solid games, efficient games. But the problem is Cam Newton, right? So whenever they got into the red zone, it was Cam Newton rushing the ball. And so I think like Harris had like 0.2 red zone touches per game last year because Cam Newton averaged nearly 2+. And so that's where we go back to that Mac Jones and Cam Newton conversation. If it's Cam as the quarterback, I'm probably avoiding all these guys and not looking their way in redraft or dynasty. But if it's Mac Jones, I think there's an opportunity here where he won't run the ball a lot. The offense could be more efficient, and then you might have some more red zone touches for Harris or Stevenson or even White. So, I like Harris, but it might just be best to go with whichever value drops to you. And I don't know, like the 20th round in dynasty startups. So, yeah.
I'm honestly sticking with all reliable and saying James White for 1 more year. He was someone that I really liked going into last year, but it didn't really work out. Obviously, Cam didn't help really anybody out on that team, so it didn't go well. But he has that PPR upside, which I really like. And for just like the general upside and just the unknown, I think Stevenson, because he's the cheapest. Maybe he gets more opportunity than we think. I did like JJ Taylor as a stash, but with this group right here, he's not even worth it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting backfield. I think Marvin, you made a great point about if it's Cam Newton as a starter, you're probably going to start to fade these running backs because we know what Cam can do in regards to running the ball. But then when it does switch over to Mac Jones, that's then when it gains my interest, because we're talking about a quarterback that we've just mentioned. He's not the most mobile quarterback, so you've then got that potential opportunity for the dump off passes to your running backs, and somebody like Damian Harris, who I think is definitely capable in the receiving game, could see a real spike in his production. Same with somebody like Stevenson, you've just mentioned, another guy that can play both phases of the game. He can run the ball and be a receiver. And as you say, Jacob, James White is just the old reliable. And when it comes to PPR, I think he's a great cheap option. If you talk about zero RB, I think he's a guy that in a PPR league, I think it is great to pick up right at the middle part, end part of your drafts. Ali, what's your feeling on the backfield?
So I've got a couple of sayings in dynasties: never to take any Ravens wide receivers, and don't take any Patriots running backs. So I'm avoiding all of these. But if I had to pick one, it'd probably be James White. Being a Buccaneers fan, there was a lot of rumors that he'd come to the Bucs this season, which would have been really good for us. So I was disappointed there. And he'd probably be the one with his PPR upside. At the RB57, I think you're getting a bit of value there. Harris is interesting at the RB32. I think he's got some more upside if he does take over that backfield. But with Cam Newton as the starter, it definitely caps the ceiling for all of these players. So generally, I'm out on all of them.
Yeah. Hey man, with the Bucks, Giovanni Bernard, dude.
Yeah, well,
get excited.
It ended up well, actually. I think it's going to be really good for us this year.
We've just had a comment from Dave saying that he took Ramondre Stevenson in the early third round of rookie drafts. What do you guys feel about that? Is he somebody you're happy to take at that point?
I think you could wait a little bit potentially, but at the same time, with how early running backs are picked just in general, that's probably where you have to take them, especially with that exciting unknown for these running backs.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, depending on the draft, it seems like that part of the, that third round, early third round, mid, late third round, it just dries up quickly. I mean, even in the late second, right? So at that point, you grab guys who have the potential opportunity to be a lead running back. And because it's such a murky backfield, Stevenson kind of fits the bill there. And so honestly, yeah, I think third round and with the upside to be a starting running back, that's definitely worth it. But yeah, I would personally wait, but there's nothing wrong with going a little earlier to get your guy.
Yeah, absolutely. As I just mentioned, I think when you get to that territory, it's just kind of get your guy. You're going for the dart throws, and he's in a backfield where you could easily see snaps quite early. So yeah, he's definitely somebody I'd be targeting. As you say, I think you could wait a little bit longer, maybe get him mid third. But if you're on the clock and you've got that opportunity of getting him, and you believe he can crack into this backfield, yeah, I've got no issues at all getting him early third. So with that, we'll move on to the wide receivers. And Ali, do you want to fire your question over to the guys?
Yeah, let's talk about the awesome wide receiver room at the Patriots. So we've got Aguilar, N'Keal Harry, Jacoby Myers, and Kendrick Bourne. So like any of these guys on your dynasty radars. So I'll just say their ADPs. Aguilar is the wide receiver 68. Harry's the 86. There's no ADP data we've got for Myers at the minute, and then Kendrick Bourne is wide receiver 98. So all going really late. So are any of them on your dynasty radars?
Man, I think they're all decent late round flyers. Like Aguilar was the wide receiver 34 in PPR last year, so that's decent. And even in standard, he was even better. But with just in general, it's just like if you're in a deep league, I think they're good. Aguilar, Bourne, good. I think Myers is a really, really good guy that you could potentially, with no ADP, get off your waiver wire. Maybe Harry. I'll let Marvin talk.
We might be talking about Harry anyways later. I don't have much to say about Harry. I mean, first round wide receiver, but yeah, that's it. But the guy that I like from this list, partially because his ADP might be just so low, we don't have data on it, but it's Jacoby Myers, and I think he's continuously faded, but he's shown over the last 2 years that when given the opportunity, he's actually really, really good. And that's why I like him a lot, considering the production and the current costs in dynasty leagues. Looking at some of the stats last year, he was wide receiver in target share, which is insane considering it's the Patriots. I mean, it's still a lot of targets there, right? Wide receiver 7 air yard share, wide receiver 8 in yards per route run. So he got the volume when I think it was like after week 7-ish or so, he was efficient, finished as a wide receiver 2 or better in 36% of his final 11 games. So it wasn't anything flashy. He was probably more of a flex wide receiver, but honestly, it's still production. He's shown he can do it. And regardless of his draft capital or whatever it was, 2 years ago, he's produced. And so at this point, I think he's the better guy, even over Harry, in my opinion, and partially because of the value you can get with him. So I'm all in on Myers. I'm not a fan of the other guys. Like Aguilar is okay, but it's not, I don't know. It's just, it's Aguilar. So there's that.
and I think it's quite interesting as well with obviously Julian Edelman retiring. Like he's now opening that slot role. We know Myers was predominantly a slot wide receiver. I believe Kendrick Bourne as well can play in that slot role. So I think if either of those guys can get a firm grip of that slot role, it could be brilliant for fantasy. I mean, we've said a little bit when we talked about the running backs, but when we're moving on from Cam Newton and getting somebody like Mac Jones, that could potentially be a nice increase to any of these wide receivers. We've just had a comment from Dave saying about Aguilar. He could be quite a sneaky value when it comes to Mac Jones stepping in, and I definitely agree with that. I believe Mac Jones, for all we're slamming him for his rushing ability, when it comes to a passer, he's shown that he can be a very capable passer. So yeah, a guy that I'm potentially looking to grab when Mac Jones steps in.
To be honest, all of these wide receivers at their current ADPs represent some sort of value. Someone's going to get the target, so their ADPs are so low that you can take a shot on any of these guys, really.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to Aguilar, then, what would you actually pay to acquire Aguilar? Is the guy that is the highest in the ADP? Is it a second round pick in regards to rookie picks, or is he more third round? That's probably where I'd be leaning, an early third pick.
I think 2022 third is pretty good, and like if you're talking 2021 picks, like a mid to late third.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've seen him traded actually in a couple of my leagues during the rookie drafts, and it was around for a third. It was for a third round pick. I think that's about where you go. And I mean, if you're trying to trade him away, if you can get a late second and maybe grab some of those rookie receivers that still have some upside there, I would do it. But getting him as a third who could be a flex receiver, I mean, he definitely has that upside. You know, I agree with Dave there that if it's Mac Jones, there's definitely some upside there. So it doesn't hurt to grab him with a third round pick.
Yeah. So we just mentioned him a little bit earlier, N'Keal Harry. Do you think he can bounce back if we're going to move on from Cam Newton to Mac Jones? We've just been saying how we think it could be a potential bonus for the wide receivers. Is there any hope of a bounce back, or are we out on Harry?
You know, I'm personally out on him. When I saw this question on the show sheet, I did some digging because I was like, well, he's a first round receiver. I mean, that has to be, you know, it has to count for something. So then I looked at, you know, wide receivers since 1980 who did not exceed 500 yards in their first two seasons, but were drafted in the first round. So they have draft capital, but they didn't produce. And the names, if you look at this list, I mean, it's just gross. You have Laquan Treadwell, Kevin White, John Ross, Darius Hayward-Bay. I mean, a bunch of guys who we all thought had potential, but they just didn't put anything together and they couldn't produce for fantasy. And the best player from that group was Santana Moss, who had a few decent seasons after a slower start. So there's always a possibility, but if I look at the odds of it, I don't think it's very high at this point. So I'm personally fading him, and there might still be someone out there willing to take a chance for a second round pick in a rookie draft. Maybe I would do it, honestly, considering some of the wide receivers that I really like in this class. So yeah, I'm personally just fading Harry right now.
Yeah, I think Drew, who's at DF Bean Counter on Twitter, says it best in that any rookie that does not do well their first year, get rid of them because the odds are super, super slim. Yeah. And I mean, if someone does believe he's a 20th round pick, I mean, I guess if you really, really want to, you can, and you're not going to get hurt. But I'm with Marvin. I want to disagree with you, Marvin. I really, really do, but I just can't right here. Like I'm just not in on Harry anymore.
One of these questions will disagree.
I'll disagree just for the show. I'll disagree. Just for
there you go. All right.
well, I'll throw in a disagree because it's a tough subject for me. But I was one of the idiots that drafted Harry as my 101 when it was the 2019 rookie draft. So yeah, it's definitely a tough subject for me. And I'm always going to be a guy that's hopefully can bounce back, just because I want to try and save a bit of face and at least get a bit of fantasy production out of him. But I just think that when you're talking about these wide receivers, there's nobody really that stands out. So potentially there's that opportunity that Harry can be that guy that can step forward. We've seen that he can be used in a lot of ways, and he's actually quite good when he gets the ball in his hands as a runner. He's quite good at that, and they've used him in a various different ways. So I know I'm clutching at straws here, but I'm still going to hope that there's the potential that he can at least bounce back and give me some kind of reward for the faith that I've shown in him. But yeah, even though I don't like Josh Jacobs, but I really do wish I took Josh Jacobs over N'Keal Harry. But we'll move on to the tight end position. It's obviously a position that's seen a lot of change after free agency. So Ali, what's your questions in regards to the tight ends?
Yeah, so potentially the tight ends are more interesting than the wide receivers on the Patriots. So two tight ends I was quite high on have ended up together in New England, in Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. Difficult question, but which do you prefer to own in Dynasty? And do you think they can both be fantasy relevant?
Yeah, so this question's interesting because you have the ADPs here where Henry's going in the 11th, like late 11th round as tight end 11, Jonnu as the tight end 17 in the mid 13th round. And so with that, am I coming through okay? I'm getting some static on my end.
Yeah.
Okay,
fine.
perfect. So I would say just in general, I prefer Henry over Jonnu, but based on that ADP right there, I think Jonnu's the better deal. And in general, I can see a lot of the touchdowns going to these tight ends in the red zone, which is going to make their value. I mean, honestly, every tight end's boom bust, to be honest, except for the top three. But it makes it to where they're exciting to have just because I can see them really just knocking the wide receivers down a lot and making it to where they're getting a lot of receptions. They're going to be doing a lot of touchdowns. And it honestly makes the tight end room really exciting for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And gotta agree again. I just have to. It's.
I'm just kidding. I want Jonnu. Just kidding.
Well, okay. So I do agree that either one of these guys could have some value because regardless, I think they'll kind of be the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2s in this offense. I think they signed them to big deals this offseason for a reason. And they'll have them both on the field, line them up everywhere. I mean, they're versatile in that sense. And, I like, Henry a little more because we've seen a lot from him. He's kind of had several fringe wide receiver 1, tight end 1 seasons. He could be a wide receiver on this team. It's possible. But that's where you can really just mix and match it and just go with the value, the guy that drops, because they're kind of similar. It looks like they're within like 2 rounds that separate them in ADP. So grab whichever one's there in the 12th round. And I think they'll be used heavily. So you can't really go wrong with either one of these guys.
Yeah, Ali, what do you feel about these two tight ends?
Oh, it was tough because I was a Jonnu Smith truther. So to see them both land on the Patriots, but then again, like you say, they're both probably going to be the first to receive an option. So I don't mind which one I have. Jonnu going 6 spots later, probably draw towards him. I like to have an athletic tight end, so Jonnu Smith definitely intrigues me there. He can be a bit more of a deep threat. So yeah, I'll probably favour Jonnu just at his ADP. But both are quite interesting. I'd certainly rather have these on my team than I would the wide receivers.
Yeah, I'm a little like you, Ali, that I was a big Jonnu fan. And when he landed on the Patriots, I was ready to go for the full victory lap on Twitter. I was getting him to load all the tweets up. And then it was like the next day when Hunter Henry signed, I was so glad that I didn't tweet out about it because I definitely got egg on my face. It was absolutely gut-wrenching to see that the potential opportunity that we could have had with somebody like Jonnu Smith, who I believe is a really versatile tight end, who, again, we've just said it with Ezekiel Elliott. I believe that Jonnu Smith can be used in various different ways with his size. He can be used as that H-back. He can be used all over the field. So for me personally, I probably still favour Jonnu Smith and just looking at the ADPs, if he's going later than Hunter Henry, he's definitely a guy that I'll target. Obviously, Hunter Henry as well. He's had the issues with injuries. Now, I'm not going to suggest that we want him to get injured again, but if that does happen and it does go down, then Smith's into an expanded role, and as you say, he could quite easily be the number 1 receiving option with the Patriots. And a thing that we keep mentioning, but again, when Mac Jones comes in, that just feels like it's going to be a potential upgrade. We know that rookie quarterbacks, they tend to lean on the tight ends as well. So for that reason, I think either one of these guys is somebody that's good to have. But yeah, when it comes to tight ends, are you really going to be happy getting him though? He's in that kind of pool that we've just spoke about a little earlier, where it's kind of a wasteland, and there's nothing really that excites you. The upside is probably not really there, and especially with these two guys eating into each other's production. So I'm just interested to know what your feelings is regards to addressing the tight end position in your drafts. Are you like what a lot of people seem to be like in targeting the early tight ends, and if not, we're just going to wait until those last few picks and throw plenty of darts and hope we hit?
I love the shotgun approach. If you miss one of the first 3, pretty much, even like Hawkinson and Fant are like borderline for me. But yeah, I'm going for Kittle, Kelsey, Waller for sure. I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but I can go ahead and start about now. Like, if you can find the next Darren Waller, Robert Tonyan, Logan Thomas type, that's going to help you out a lot. And I was trying to look through some tight ends, and nothing's really popping out to me right now, but potentially, like, if I don't know what'll happen with Jared Cook, but Parham is someone I've always liked. He's probably on someone's roster, but you could trade a 3rd round pick if you wanted to take him as a flyer. But there's going to be somebody always comes out. Like, it's going to be somebody, and we're going to be like, wow, Robert Tonyan and Logan Thomas were tight end 3. What happens? But that's just something that just try to find one of those. And if you can get one of those top tight ends, especially if you're a contender, it's going to make your team so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, those 2 guys you mentioned, Tonyan and Thomas, could have potentially even been on waivers in some dynasty leagues, right? Yeah. They could have been available. So, you know, just be focused on some of the news that comes out of camp. You know, Logan Thomas was getting great, you know, reviews from the coaching staff, and they loved him. And he was the guy. And so there's always someone that emerges, right? But getting that advantage at tight end, having one of the top tight ends, whether that be a Tonyan who comes out of nowhere, or a Kelsey, or a Kittle, I mean, that advantage is as good as a top 3 down running back for your fantasy teams in your lineup. So try to get those guys. I mean, it doesn't hurt to pay up to grab one of those top 3 tight ends, but if you don't grab them, you know, like Jake said, just try to grab someone with upside, and if not, there's always someone that shows up, throughout the season. So
is this a Tim Tebow reference?
No,
absolutely.
Yes. Get out of here.
There's our first disagreement.
No, I'm kidding. Go get Irv Smith Jr. Go get Irv Smith Jr. You'll love life.
Yeah.
Just a quick follow up about the tight ends. Where do you have Kyle Pitts ranked in your dynasty ranks?
Ooh, that's a good question. If you have that, Marvin, go for it.
Yeah, I'm like, I'll pull it up right now, but I believe I have him as a top 6 tight end in my rankings in dynasty, and actually I have him as my tight end 5. So
that's right, dude. I have him there too. What the heck?
We might as well just add one of you on this show, because
honestly, it's so redundant to have both of us on here. But I love Kyle Pitts. I think he, you know, when you look at his combination of athleticism and how he just is so much better than so many prospects we've seen, his production profile, his efficiency in college, it's everything you want from a tight end, and he's the best prospect we've seen legitimately from like a film and analytical standpoint over the last, I mean, since Gronk, if you want to say that, right? So I definitely think that he's worth that top pick in dynasty leagues. Gives you a great advantage. And we talk about trying to get a Kelsey or a Kittle. Well, this is about as cheap as Kyle Pitts is probably going to be. I don't think his value is going to drop even next season or the season after that because of the hype around him and the upside. But I do think he does pull through and is a great tight end. Maybe not the best tight end this season, but he will be in the upcoming years. So, yeah, I like him a lot.
Marvin, I got a question for you. What would you pay for Kyle Pitts right now? Would you go for like 2 2022 firsts right now?
I mean, I think I would consider it. I'd want something else back, you know, like a flex receiver or something else in return, just so that I'm not giving up, 2 chances at a top, prospect in 2022. But then again, I think the consensus right now is that this 2022 class isn't as good as even, 2021 or 2023. So getting someone as generational as, everyone throws that word around, but I do think he is that good. If you can get someone like Kyle Pitts, I would definitely consider it. And I would just maybe get a little more in return, in addition to Kyle Pitts, but he's worth it. I think he just has that upside. What do you think?
Yeah, I was just thinking that if you're more of a rebuilding, retooling team, it makes a ton of sense. Go for that upside, because let's be honest, he's probably not, like, he'll be a top 12 tight end most likely, because that's easy. Like, it's not hard to be a top 12 tight end, but if he breaks into that top 4 tier, I will be surprised. That doesn't mean he's going to have a bad season, but he'll be in that middle tier tight end where like Logan Thomas, Robert Tonyan were this last year. And then I agree with Marvin in that I think he can accelerate and get a lot better over the next couple of years.
I think it gets interesting if Julio Jones is traded. Then it opens up a lot of room for Pitts this season. But I think it just divides opinion, because some people have already crowned him their dynasty tight end 1, whereas some people have him down as at 6 or 7. So I'm interested to see where you had him. I think 5 is about where I've got him as well.
I mean, I think this just shows how bad the tight end position is when we've got to talk about a Falcons tight end when we're trying to talk about the Patriots. So I think that says it all, really, doesn't it? So with that, we'll move on to the Bills. We'll try and talk a bit more about the Bills and not go off on a tangent. But yeah, the Buffalo Bills. Ali, do you want to throw the first question to the guys about the Bills?
Yeah, so the Bills are a lot more interesting for Dynasty for me. Obviously, talk about Josh Allen, the quarterback, finished as the quarterback 1 in 2020. Presuming that Mahomes is drafted as the QB1 in startups, in Superflex startups, who are you drafted in the startups as the QB2? Is it Josh Allen, or is it Kyler Murray, or is it somebody else?
Yeah, I can start it off. I would actually take Kyler Murray here. But I have Josh Allen as my QB3. So they're basically, their upsides are fairly similar. I do think Kyler has a slightly better rushing floor. And I do like that offense, a tad bit. I mean, if you look at Kyler Murray had 800 plus yards last year. It's just insane, that floor that he gives you, the ceiling that he has. And then he has DeAndre Hopkins, Rondell Moore, who I really, really like, Christian Kirk. I mean, the shell of AJ Green is still something, right? I mean, and so I do think I like the overall offense that they have, and his rushing floor as well. But I mean, you can't really complain. That's why Allen is still my QB3. I mean, because he has that rushing floor. He has Diggs, who's amazing, and he does have some solid weapons there too. But overall, I do like Murray's situation just a little more.
All right, Marvin, we're going to disagree for once.
All right, there we go.
So it's going to be actually a little bit of a tangent, I guess, because Allen is my QB3, but my QB2, man, I just love me some Dak Prescott. Like, he had such a good start to the season, and then he got hurt. And I'm with Marvin in that. I think like Dak, Allen, Kyler Murray, they're all around the same tier. They're in that QB tier that's pretty large, honestly. It's Mahomes, and then it's like 6 other guys. Mm-hmm. So with that, you could potentially wait, and Dak's the guy that keeps falling, honestly. And with Dak and Allen, I think they're neck and neck in 4-point per touchdown leagues. But if you're going to that 5 or 6 point per touchdown, Dak all day. People have been sending me offers for Dak, and I'm just like, I need more. I need way more. Like, give me more if you want him. And I'm glad I have him in a couple leagues.
Yeah, I mean, Dave just made the same comment that you just said, Jacob, about there being Mahomes, and then there's that group of quarterbacks, and I'm a little bit like you, Jacob. We've just had the Dynasty Theory guys on a little earlier, and Dan Lemanga, obviously being the Cowboys fan that he is, he was trying to pump that Prescott talk, and he was winning me over. I mean, we spoke about it, but the offense that he's on, that high-powered offense, he's got the rushing ability. He's by no means an old quarterback. He's 27 years old, so Dak Prescott's definitely right up there for me as well. I have Kyler Murray as my number 2, but then I think it's close between Josh Allen and Dak Prescott for me to be that QB4. But yeah, just going back to Josh Allen, I think he took massive steps forward, didn't he, last year? And it was something that we needed to see from him, because we saw the potential that he had. It was just the accuracy really that was holding him back. But then last year, he put up fantastic numbers from a fantasy perspective with that rushing ability. That the fact that they didn't even have a running game as well tended to help the fact that he likes to run the ball, and that's why he managed to get some of those rushing touchdowns as well. So I can fully understand why people would be high on Josh Allen, and as we said, that core group after Mahomes, I can understand why people have him right at the top of that list.
Wasn't Josh Allen also like a late first, early second round QB in Superflex rookie drafts?
I think he was.
I think he was. Don't sleep on those guys, man. Like ADP always goes up. Like, yes, Daniel Jones is dropping, but you could have got a really good haul for him after that early second pick.
Mm-hmm.
This is a Mac Jones thing. Mac Jones, don't forget about him. I'm still on the topic, I promise.
It's fine. It's fine. Ali, have you got any final thoughts on Josh Allen?
So I think I'm the only one with Josh Allen as the QB2. I think he can repeat as a QB1, but he needs a lot to go for him again this year. I think him and Diggs were awesome together, but whether they can keep up that rate we'll see. They've got some interesting weapons as well. But it's really close for me between him and Kyler. But I've just got Josh Allen just ahead of Kyler. But yeah, it is really close.
I've just got a quick question. What about John Brown? Obviously, we know that the connection that he had with John Brown. Do you see the fact that he's moved on? Do you see that potentially affecting Josh Allen? Obviously, we know the connection he's got with Stephon Diggs, but is there any concerns that he's losing a guy that he lent on quite heavily at one stage? So I'm just wondering if you had any feelings on that.
I think he'll be okay. What do you think, Marvin?
Yeah, I was gonna try to see if I can find like how well he's performed with him, but I not enough time here. But
I didn't throw that one on you, Marvin.
I didn't help you at all. I said, Marvin, you got it.
I was just hoping you'd like go on a tangent for like 2 minutes. But
hey, if you need me to, I can.
But they do have plenty of weapons there, and I think, they brought in Emmanuel Sanders. They still have Gabriel Davis, who we might talk about here in a little bit. And so I think Stephon Diggs, if anything, is like he drives this offense, and it's because of his efficiency and how good he is that this offense is what it is with Josh Allen. So that's why, regardless, I think as long as he's there, you can surround Stephon Diggs with decent receivers, and they do, and they have. I think he'll be just fine, and they definitely have that clear-cut wide receiver one that really just elevates an offense to new heights, and that's what he did last year, right? I mean, that's why they're so good, is because of Diggs and the improvement with Allen.
So I can actually add a little bit in that. John Brown was hurt for 8 weeks last year, and he actually had out of the weeks that he played, 2 weeks he had 0 PPR points, like nothing. So that was 10 weeks out of 16 that he was not getting any points, and Josh Allen was still the QB1. So thanks for talking right there, Marvin.
You could team up for that, and now you've taken all the glory there, Jacob.
so I like Josh Allen, yeah.
No, and Kev's just put a comment in as co-host saying that Josh Allen, Dino QB2, so he agrees with you, Ali, that he should be the quarterback 2 in Dynasty. So we'll move on from the quarterback, and we'll go to the running back. It's a position it's not super exciting when we're talking about the Bills, but it tended to be a running back committee between Devin Singletary and Zach Moss in 2020. I just want to know how you see this playing out in 2021. They've obviously brought in Matt Breida as well. Do you think there's any one of these 3 guys that could potentially take a step forward and assert himself as that lead guy in Buffalo?
I'm going to be honest that I don't really see anybody being a great dynasty asset out of this group because no one really did anything last year. In general, I'm going to stick with the cheapest guy, and Matt Breida. I think you can get him for a 2022 third, and we'll just see what happens. Obviously, he has some injury problems, but he could be a decent guy. He's always been explosive too, which is great to have in any type of flex player. But I still expect Allen to get his touchdowns, and in general, he's going to make it where if you put any of these guys in there, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah, it's not a group that I really want to have in Dynasty, and it almost feels like you can have both Moss, Devin Singletary, and even Matt Breida. You can have all 3 of them, and you never really you'll go through the season not knowing who to start, and you'll be disappointed most weeks. But I do like Zach Moss and what he showed us last year. I mean, I wasn't the biggest Zach Moss fan, when he came out of college, but he was involved in the red zone, had more red zone opportunities on 3 less games than Devin Singletary. So that when they're in the red zone, they use him pretty frequently. He was an efficient running back. Looking at some his yards created per touch, it's RB7, RB7 as well, and evaded tackles per touch. So, can create for himself. I mean, he's not the quickest guy, most elusive guy, but he can still do it and break some tackles there. But he did see like an absurd amount of light fronts when he was running. And so I'm not sure if that had anything to do with the fact that that might be why he was able to create so many yards and all that. But it's still, I think one of these running backs will have some value. It's just, to me, it's too hard to predict. They'll kind of steal from each other. And so, that's why I'd rather stay away from them. But, doesn't hurt to throw I don't know, like a 2021 third on one of these guys, and 2020 second third, or even maybe a late second to see if one of them emerges. But it's a risk either way.
Yeah, I'm loving the stats, Marvin. I'm loving the stats.
I think I'm like you, Marvin. I'm obviously not. It's a backfield that you're not going to get excited about when it comes to fantasy. But if there was one that I was going to take, it'd probably be Moss. He was the guy that I think probably stood out a little bit more than what Singletary did. He can obviously be used as a great runner. He's got that size that you particularly look for in an NFL running back, and he did contribute as well in the passing game. So, yeah, I think he's the one guy that I gravitate towards. But whoever you pick, they're not going to be the running back one on the Bills, because it's going to be Josh Allen. He's going to be the guy that's going to get the receiving yards, and he's going to be the guy that's going to vulture those touchdowns for your running back. So it's probably a backfield that I'm looking to avoid. And just looking at the ADPs, Zach Moss in the 10th and Singletary in the 30th, that's probably the area where I'm looking to shoot then at wide receiver. If I've in my startups, I tend to go running back heavy and obviously quarterback heavy at the start in Superflex League. So when you get into this stage, it's more, I'd rather take a shot on the wide receivers with the depth that there is at wide receiver. So yeah, probably a backfield I'm just going to avoid. Ali, have you got any final thoughts on this backfield?
Yeah, it's just another running back committee that's annoying for fantasy, isn't it? We saw the potential in Moss, but he didn't quite bring it last season. But I think he's still got a little bit more time, so I'll give him another shot this year. I don't know, between the two, they're both going pretty late, so my dart throw will probably be on Moss. But then Breeder adding to the mix just makes it even more complicated. So just another backfield that you want to try and avoid, really.
Yeah, it's definitely not the most exciting fantasy position to talk about when we're talking about the Bills. So we'll move on to the wide receiver. It's a little bit more exciting. Ali, what's your question to the guys in regards to the wide receivers?
Yeah, it's just about Stephon Diggs. He obviously had the awesome 2020 season where he finished as a wide receiver 3. Do you see him repeating that this year? And also, where does he sit in your dynasty rankings?
Yeah, I definitely think he has the opportunity to be that wide receiver 3 again, or top 3 receiver in any format, really. And I think that's mainly due to the volume that he'll receive. I mean, I believe he set career highs in targets last year. I don't think he ever saw that many targets in Minnesota. So I think volume will be there. I'm not sure if he'll be as efficient, because he was at a very efficient pace last year. Wide receiver 6 in yards per route run, was wide receiver 2 in completed air yards, wide receiver 1 in receiving yards. I mean, he was just super, super efficient. And so I'm not sure if that's necessarily sustainable, similar to a guy like Devonte Adams, who was very efficient last year too. Not sure if he can sustain that, but regardless, we talk about regression might not matter, because volume is always going to be there for him. So they'll be productive, they'll be involved, they'll get the targets and reception. So for me, I'm looking at he's currently my wide receiver 7 in Dynasty. I think they're just a couple of younger guys. I'm assuming that's where you have him. If you're laughing there,
it's an 8. It's an 8, so it's really close. It's closer than I thought it was going to be.
But I've seen Diggs as like a wide receiver 2 in Dynasty, or wide receiver 3. I wouldn't fault anyone for putting him there. I just think there are guys like AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, DeAndre Hopkins I still really like, and they're actually, both of those guys are similar in age, right? So to me, there's a lot more to like about some of these other receivers. But I think, kind of like we talked about, that quarterback, that second tier is kind of all lumped together. I think the second tier of wide receivers, where it's like Brown, Jefferson, Diggs, Metcalf, Hopkins, I think they're all great receivers and will still be productive for like 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, man, Marvin, we must have been on podcasts too often, dude. We just be agreeing. But with y'all have ADP here of wide receiver 6, 3.08, and as Marvin said, he has a wide receiver 7. I'm wide receiver 6 or wide receiver 8. Goodness, but in general, I'm more thinking like draft strategy wise. In the 3rd round, I'm gonna want at least 1 running back and 2 QBs. So I'm gonna probably not touch Diggs. I'm going to wait on wide receiver, hope a tight end falls into the 4th round to get my first wide receiver in the 5th. You could honestly probably get Amari Cooper in like the 5th or 6th. I saw someone tweeted that, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So, if you have Diggs on your team, though, you should be extremely happy, because you probably got him for cheap and you probably held on to him, or maybe you paid up for him and you're really happy with how he finished the season. But I expect him to be great. Like Marvin said, he's going to get the volume. He's going to be fantastic for years to come.
Yeah. I'm a little bit like what you said. I just mentioned it earlier about I'll be the same. I don't tend to target wide receivers early in my startups. The only chance that I potentially consider it is if I've just grabbed Josh Allen in the first round as my quarterback, and then Diggs falls to the fourth round. Then I've maybe got 2 running backs or another quarterback and a running back. Maybe then I want to do the stack and get both together. That's potentially where I would lean and favor grabbing Diggs, but otherwise he's one of those guys, like a lot of these top wide receivers, I'm probably not going to have many shares of because it's just my approach to startups. Ali, what are you like when it comes to Diggs? Is he somebody that you're happy to get in the third, or is he somebody you're not going to have many shares of?
Yeah, no, similarly to you both, I think I prefer to go get my quarterbacks and my running backs early. There's so much depth at wide receiver, so I'm happy to hammer wide receiver in rounds 5 to 10. So I'm probably not going to get many shares at him at 308. I don't know what his ADP was this time last season, but it's a hell of a lot, stronger now. So you're happy if you drafted him last season.
He probably went quite cheap as well last season, obviously coming from Minnesota. Yeah. A lot of people were down on him. We didn't know what Josh Allen was going to be. He obviously struggled in 2019, and I think you probably got quite a good value, Stephon Diggs, and definitely nowhere near what he's going for now anyway.
Oh yeah, I was another one that had my doubts about the move.
Yeah,
there was doubts about Josh Allen with his inaccurate throw-in. I wouldn't even pay up for his value last year, so. If you had him, you're incredibly happy what his value is now.
Yeah. Just a quick question: do you think that they sustain that pass-heavy offense in Buffalo?
I think they have to. They don't have running backs.
True.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is a very good point, Jake.
Yep. I mean, if you have Diggs as your wide receiver 1, I think you almost have to as well. Like,
it'd be a waste.
It's really good wide receiver 1, average running backs at best. So then you just go with the weapons you have, and they'll probably have to pass it more if they want to win.
True. Yeah. So just talking about the wide receiver, we talk about a guy that's a bit of a sleeper in regards to the dynasty community, and that's Gabriel Davis. Made a good start to last season. But now also we know the addition of Emmanuel Sanders in free agency. Do you think that ends any potential hope of a breakout in 2021, or is he a guy that you're still happy to go out and acquire?
All right, Martin, before I talk, are you a fan of Davis or not?
I'm
in between.
I think so. I'm going to be a huge fan of Davis for this.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
I'm ready. So, yeah, I mean, you already mentioned John Brown and how he was not really this last year, as we talked about, but the year before, he was a big part of it. And with Gabriel Davis, he could potentially become that wide receiver too. And we just said they don't have any running backs. So they're going to have to throw the ball. And I don't have the stats in front of me. I bet Marvin could pull them up real quick and make my case even better. But with that, like, you could probably get Davis for a late second, early third in 2021. I wouldn't do a 2022 second right now, but you could maybe do something like potentially like Aguilar in a 2022 third for Gabriel Davis. And with Emmanuel Sanders, like, yes, he was surprising last year, especially coming off of that Achilles injury. And I don't know how much he has left. So with this, I think Davis is a good guy to have stashed, and most people that have him probably really like him, which makes it tough if you're trying to trade for him. But in startups, wide receiver 54 into the 12th round, that's a solid spot to get Davis.
Yeah, I think he definitely has.
You better not agree with me.
No. I'm not as optimistic. I love him. That's it. I love him. I think he's more in between for me, where I like his ADP. Where you don't have to pay up too much to get him in dynasty startups, or even just trying to trade for him. I think the upside's there, but it's the fact that he's only a 4th round receiver kind of limits his upside. I do think his production profile coming out of college was intriguing, but I wasn't the highest on him. I know he was an early declare, if I remember correctly, so that's positive for him. Had a dominant junior season, but I think the fact that he didn't really get the draft capital was kind of worrisome. So overall, I think there's opportunity kind of trumps everything, right? Like, it doesn't even matter where you were drafted. If you get the opportunity and you're efficient with it, then you'll be fantasy relevant. I was trying to pull up some of his Jacob, thank you, to pull out some of his stats, but I don't think he was necessarily the most efficient guy either on a per route basis, per touch basis. He was a little better, but that's because he was the deep threat. And I think regardless now with Sanders there, I don't think Sanders is, I don't think he's as much of a deep threat anymore. And so if there's a role for Davis there, it's got to be in the deep threat role. With John Brown no longer there, stealing some of that. So I do think there's some opportunity there where, like in best ball leagues or even in like as someone who you can throw in for bye weeks, I think he might have some of those bigger weeks to kind of help your fantasy lineups.
I think you make a great point, Marvin. And I was just going to say that Davis, he only had one game with 5 or more receptions. And with that, he had 2 games where he had over 6 targets. And his yards per catch were like, in the games that he was efficient, or not really efficient, but just he got the points, it was like 20, 25, 26. So yeah, Marvin's exactly right. He's going to be that deep threat that you're best ball. Yes. Bye weeks, you're fingers crossed praying. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I've seen a lot of people cooling on Davis because of the Emmanuel Sanders signing. But I tweeted out the other day quite an interesting fact when it comes to the Bills, that there was only 2 teams that had over 8% of their offensive snaps where they had 4 wide receivers on the field. That was the Cardinals and then the Buffalo Bills. The Bills were at 15%. And the Cardinals at 20%. So even if you are worried about that potential opportunity, I don't think you need to be when it comes to the Bills. As I say, these 2 teams, the Cardinals and the Bills, they had plenty of opportunities where there was 4 wide receivers on the field at one time. So for me, that would be a thing that I don't know why people are worried about the opportunity when there's clearly an opportunity. And I'd argue that is the 3rd wide receiver on this team at worst anyway. So we're going to see a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. So I'm not too worried personally about the opportunity that Davis could get. What do you feel, Ali?
Yeah, I think people have called on him. I think there was the hype train that was towards the end of the last season. I think a lot of people were talking about him being the next breakout star, building onto this season. But obviously with the signing of Sanders, people have called on him to a point where I'm probably happy to take him as the wide receiver 54 in round 12. He's only 22 years old. So he's young and he's produced in spells. He scored 7 touchdowns last season. So at that ADP, that's a value again, which I'm quite surprised at, actually.
Yeah.
One interesting question I just thought of is Bryan Edwards or Gabriel Davis?
I think I'd personally lean Gabriel Davis. I just think if I'm going to pick between the 2, they're both arguably dart throws. I'm going to pick the offense that's the most explosive. It's going to be pass heavy, as we just said. There's no running game to this offense. So if I was going to pick between the 2, I'm going to go towards the situation. And I personally think Gabriel Davis for me. What do you think, Marvin?
They're very close in their opportunity. I mean, if it's an Aaron Rodgers led Raiders offense, then maybe. But
you can't just do that. You can't just put Aaron Rodgers in there and then play.
I mean, hey, it hurts me just as much because I'm a Packer fan, so it is painful. But I think I'd probably still lean Bryan Edwards because of. I just liked him a little more coming out of the draft. Just liked what he could bring and his potential in an offense that, I think there's, I was just thinking here, Diggs is the wide receiver 1, but then you look at the Raiders and the wide receiver 1 is Darren Waller. So there's someone there ahead of him, but I do think that I like Edwards in his total profile a little more and what he was coming out of college. So I leaned that, and the draft capital was on his side as well. But in reality, I think their floors are very similar, where we didn't see much from Bryan Edwards even last year, right? And so that's the concerning piece for me. And I think, Jacob, you kind of mentioned it, rookies that don't produce in their first year, the outlook isn't as great. So the fact that he didn't produce kind of lowers his upside for me as well.
Yeah. I just don't like John Gruden. The fact he did win us a Super Bowl, but he couldn't do anything with Henry Ruggs or Bryan Edwards last year, and I was quite high on both of them. So one of them guys, I think, will bounce back and have a decent season this year. But yeah,
who do you think, Jacob? Are you going to disagree with Marvin? Can we get?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to honestly go with Davis, just because, like, if I'm thinking about John Brown is on the Raiders now, and I think that Davis can jump Sanders more, or he's more likely to jump Sanders than.
Have we lost Jacob?
We may have lost him.
Oh no!
And Brian Everett toss up. I may have just cut out there.
Yeah, we've got you back.
You're back.
Oh well, I just said Davis. There we go. We'll just stick with that.
That's all we needed to know. The fact you would disagree with Marvin, that was good enough for us.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to the last part and the tight ends. Ali, what's your question in regards to the tight end position?
So we're going to talk about Dawson Knox. So didn't start the season off very well, but in the final 9 games, including the playoffs, he caught 5 touchdowns, was a more bigger part of the offense. So do you think that he can ever become fantasy relevant, considering his best finish to date is the tight end 32, and his current ADP is tight end 27?
Yeah, I think it doesn't hurt to grab him that late. I think when you're that late, you just grab guys that have the potential to finish as a, if you're not a top 3-4 tight end, you're all just going to produce 5 points per game or something like that. I mean, it's pretty much a wasteland there, right? But I think what I like about Knox is you mentioned it, kind of the involvement after their bye week, receiving, at least 4 targets in 6 of his last 7 games. So that's pretty, that's worth something. And then also his athleticism. I think athleticism matters for tight ends more than any other position. And the fact that he kind of is an 86th percentile speed score athlete, 74th percentile agility score athlete. Like, he has all of the traits you want to see from a tight end. And so I think it's his 3rd year here. I think this could be his not breakout. I don't know if he's going to break into the tight end 1 territory, but he'll have more productive games, I believe. And if he doesn't break out or produce more this year, then I think that kind of tells us that he's probably not the guy there.
Yeah, I think Knox fits the shotgun approach with tight ends. Even if you get someone at the top tier like Kelsey, just having him there just for a bye week potentially will be nice. But in general, I'm not expecting too much.
Yeah, I think I agree. We'll round things up because we're coming to the end of his time anyway. So I just want to say a massive thank you to Jacob and Marvin for coming on. Do you just quickly want to plug yourselves, where we can find you on Twitter and what you're doing?
Yeah, I can start. I'm at jsnake_DFF, sort of on a Twitter hiatus right now. Been pretty busy with school and stuff, and I'll be hopping on a little bit more often over the summer, but maybe Marvin and I will have to do a podcast and just agree the whole time. Who knows?
Oh yeah. No, that's yeah. No, thank you guys so much for having me on. This was great. This was super fun. But yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at @FF_Marvin E. Find articles on the Fantasy Footballers, video content on Dynasty Nerds. So I'll be on Twitter. Anything that I put out will be on there. So yeah, thank you guys again.
No, absolutely.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, massive thank you for giving us your time and coming on. It was a lot of fun, even though we could have just had one of you on with the amount of time you agree, but it was great fun when we did get the disagreements. So yeah, thanks again, guys, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon, no doubt.
Cheers, guys.
All right, take care.
Take care. Oh. Just booted you out there, Ali. Sorry.
Well, I am going now, but
so yeah, that brings us to end. Now we're at the halfway stage. We've got to the end of the second quarter. I just want to again plug the Just Giving site. It's www.justgiving.com/funding/fantasy wildcard. Again, just a massive thank you to everybody that's donated so far. We're going to quickly jump off and move on to his third stream. We're going to kick off the second half, and yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you're following us on Twitter at Fantasy Wildcard and check out his YouTube channel as well. And we'll see you in a few minutes. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.